On the next episode of Corner.
You should be in jail. How about the police? Uncle Jimmy Wanjala?
I didn't do anything to her.
That's what the guilty always say.
You only have to micromanage incompetent people.
Ulifanyaje?
Nilimpa space alivyotaka, lakini nilijua pia ananihitaji.
Sasa unaona mimi sijui vile naweza fanya hizo.
Stick it out.
Kwani kuna noma buda boss?
Mbona huku niambia ukweli?
On the next episode of Elena's Ghost.
I'm not blind. I see how you two look at each other. You two are siblings and you must never forget that.
Are you leaving? You're going to leave me alone?
You don't need to worry. This is your home, and you'll be safe here.
Don't bother coming back here empty-handed. You have to get rid of Elena.
I thought you were going to do it.
I'm too far away, Monte Cristo. You have to do it yourself.
Well, so I see that they were the ones who kidnapped Latonia.
Do you have any clue? Siamak, your father has other sons too. To save him from the embarrassment.
I found out that my father is in Patliputra.
How did you get to know about
Acharya
it?
Chanakya told me, but he is not telling me who.
They killed your grandfather, you know. And they set your hut on fire.
I've learned how to please the authority in order to use the power in my favor.
Acharya Chanakya cannot hide the truth in front of Emperor Bindusar.
Do you know who my father is?
Yes.
I must tell the truth to His Highness.
All right, a warm welcome to you. Thank you very much for keeping it KBC. This is Good Morning Kenya. We are broadcasting live from the Kenya Broadcasting House here in Nairobi, Kenya. My name is Aguko. We have a lot in store for you on today's show, including updates on coronavirus. But before that, on my end, I will be having a discussion with panelists in regards to what happened yesterday, where there was drama in the Senate sitting due to the changes in leadership within the Senate of Parliament, where we have Senator Kipchumba Murkomen being replaced as the Senate Majority Leader and Susan Kihika, the Senator of Nakuru, being replaced as the Senate Majority Whip. What will happen next? What were the reasons why they were removed? What is the procedure that was followed? Was the rule of law also followed? We'll be looking into that in a bit. But also, I'll be having a discussion in regards to gender-based violence increase in Kenya. I will be joined by Anne Ngunjiri, who is a senior technical advisor at the Gender-Based Violence and Violence Against Children programs at LVCT Center.
Well, a very good morning to you. My name is Fiona Churu, and I will be here covering the newspaper segment as we have a look at what our reporters had to say about each and every story that is leading on the paper, if we can be able to cover everything. But for now, let's have a look at what will be happening. But let's give it up to Doreen.
It's this morning, and we'll just be discussing, bringing you the coronavirus awareness in regards to matter stigmatization and also what Kenyans understand by the term lockdown. But before we get to do all of that, let's look at our roads this morning, and this is what is happening in terms of traffic. This morning we look at Outer Ring Superhighway, which is the latest highway to be constructed in the country, and I want us to specifically begin at what used to be the Donholm roundabout. So clearly now, really moving at a pretty fast pace. It's just like what you were spotting yesterday yesterday on Thika Superhighway, where there was really fast moving of vehicles, in as much as, yes, there was a slight snarl up in some specific areas. But on Outer Ring Road right now, moving at a really fast pace. This is on both lanes, and this is just where the Donholm roundabout used to be before this road was reconstructed. Remember that this specific roundabout also branches off coming from Manyanja Road and branching off to Jogoo Road, going all the way to the city center. Jogoo Road is one of those roads where traffic snarl up is really normally very unbearable in this morning hour. But also interestingly, just from this place going all the way to the city center along Jogoo Road, moving at a really fast pace. Traffic just begins to slightly build up as you off from Outer Ring Road. But on Manyanja Road, one of those roads that also branches off from Outer Ring Superhighway, this is also a road that was reconstructed recently, coming all the way from Kayole as you use that roundabout there, using Jogoo Road going all the way to the city center, or branching going all the way to Juja Road, or again coming all the way from Mombasa Road. This is one of those roads that was reconstructed recently, and also in terms of traffic moving at a really, really fast pace in this morning hour, and this is on both lanes. But traffic just begins to slightly build up on the lane that is coming from the estates as you come to the city center, which is obvious because it is the morning hour, and just like we've noted in the recent past days, is that things are slightly going back to normal here in the country. So that means that people are heading back to their workstations, back to their businesses, and this is basically why we are sporting a bit of a traffic snarl up in some major parts, as well as in some major roads as well as minor roads here in the country. But still on Outer Ring Road, just as you branch off to Donholm Road, the traffic on this specific area, I can tell you, really begins to build up. So that means probably in the next hour we'll be experiencing something different, and this is on both lanes. So that means this is the lane that is leaving the city center using Outer Ring Road, going to the estates that ply this specific route, going all the way to Mombasa Road, as well as leaving Mombasa Road using Outer Ring Road and going all the way to the estates that ply Outer Ring Superhighway. Remember that Outer Ring Road begins from Mombasa Road, goes all the way to Thika Superhighway, and branches off to a number of roads, including Donholm Road, Manyanja Road, Jogoo Road, and going all the way to Juja Road. So as of now, traffic really building up on this highway. But on the inner lanes of the road, the inner lanes of Outer Ring Road, there's no traffic at all. So probably in the next link up, if you look at traffic, I'll be giving you some alternative routes for those that use Outer Ring Superhighway.
Right, and as of now, let's take a look at what is the current situation in today's COVID-19 numbers. 15 more people have been tested positive of the coronavirus here in Kenya within the last 24 hours, bringing the total to a total number of 715. 715, that is the total number of coronavirus positive cases in the country. And according to the health CAS, Rashid Aman, he said that the 15 tested positive out of the 978 samples that were tested. He said that 14 are Kenyan, while one is a Rwandese nationalist. The youngest of them all is 1.8 years old, while the oldest is a 62-year-old Kenyan.
Well, having a look at what we did yesterday covering COVID update, there are fears that many Kenyans, mainly in Mombasa, are suffering from the coronavirus in silence. The Ministry of Health says it is worrying that people are now dying in their homes in the coastal town for fear of seeking medication. This is after 2 people were reported dead in their homes in the last 24 hours as the country confirmed 15 positive cases in a similar period, 7 of them from Mombasa.
In the last 24 hours, 2 of them said to have succumbed to the diseases in their homes, something that is now worrying the government that many could be shying away from seeking medical assistance.
These deaths bring to 36 the total number of those who have succumbed to the disease.
Out of 15 confirmed cases in the last 24 hours, Mombasa took the lion's share by registering 7 positive cases. Migori had 3 cases, Wajir 2, and 1 each from Kiambu, Machakos, and Nairobi.
Mombasa, Mvita had 5 cases, and 1 each from Jomvu and Kisauni. In Migori, the 3 cases are from Kuria East, in Tebesi, and Nyamaranya. In Wajer, the cases are in Gulet Dere, in Wajer South, and Griftuhaga in Wajer East, West. In Nairobi, the 1 case is from Gidurai 44, and in Machakos from Katiani.
Health Chief Administrative Secretary Dr. Rashid Aman, while issuing the daily briefing on the pandemic, said 8 more patients were discharged from hospital in a similar period, and the country now has 715 confirmed cases since the virus was first reported in March.
We are also testing those Tanzanians who want to cross over, but we are testing them while they are still on their soil and then sharing with them the results of the test. So when they turn out positive, these Tanzanians, because they have trekked through the Tanzanian soil, need to be able to go back for isolation, but also for the contact tracing that the Tanzanian authorities need to do. So when we say that they were tested, I want it to be made clear that they were tested while they were on their soil.
Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary Macharia Kamau said the government has been willing to help its nationals abroad to return to the country, but some have been adamant, seeking to continue pursuing their ventures. To date, the country has lost 23 of its nationals to COVID-19, 10 of them in the United States of America.
Even though people recognize that there is a danger where they are, but they recognize the inevitability of remaining where they are because life must go on, and many of them have lives to live, livelihoods to pursue, education to complete, and so they prefer to remain where they are.
As we join the world in celebrating International Nurses Day, the country is not losing its focus in the fight against COVID-19. Leaders are strategizing on better ways of ending the spread of the contagious coronavirus. Irene Mchuma Udim, Channel 1 in the county of Nairobi.
Now let's have a look at how the world has been affected by COVID-19.
4,310,786. This is the number of confirmed cases throughout the entire globe in all continents. We stand at that's 4.3 million. The number of death cases as of today is at 290,455, and the recovery cases as of now also throughout the entire globe is at 1,566,686. Now, still sticking with these numbers of confirmed cases, death and recovery cases across the entire globe, since the inception of this disease, more of what we have seen is that is more of a good news, because the number of recovery cases are at least increasing and the number of death cases are at least reducing, because when you look at the confirmed cases, which is at 4.3, and the number of death cases is at 290,000, you may want to assume that probably the number of death cases might be sort of almost the same with the number of confirmed cases, but that is not the case, because as of now it is at 290,455. That is the numbers for the entire globe. And even as we speak of death cases and recovery cases, the active cases as of now, this is in regards to the currently infected patients, again throughout the entire globe, it's at 2,453,645. Remember, when we talk about active cases, this is as a result of at least the numbers of if you have to talk about active cases, is because there have been recovery cases. So this is what brings active cases, because it means that there's some people that are still infected with the disease and there are others who have recovered. So when it comes to active cases, that means the ones that were confirmed with this disease and they still have the disease. That is where it stands at 2.4 million. And even as you talk about active cases, remember there are those cases that there are mild conditions. So that means that the disease is not so much, and there are cases that are serious or critical, those that, are really have been so much infected. And in terms of mild condition, it is at 98%, which is 2,407,060. Those are the patients that's having mild condition of the coronavirus disease. And those that are in serious or critical condition is at 2%, which is at 46,585. Now, yesterday, even while we were looking at these numbers, the number of serious or critical cases was somewhat still the same. So at least that shows you that, yes, in as much as there are those who are still currently infected with the disease, but at least the number of people with serious cases are not growing as much. And at least that brings, again, it's more of a good sign, because then also that shows that people are recovering from this disease. Now, coming to the numbers in specific country this morning, again, still US tops the list with the 1.3 million. And like I kept saying, the reason for this topping of the list in terms of numbers, when it comes to US, it has been attributed to the increase of mass testing in this specific country. So as of now, US still tops the list in terms of confirmed cases.
All right, and as always, remember, as we started this morning conversation right here, we say that we have a lot in store for you this morning to keep you informed and well aware of what is going on in and around your area. Remember, we are live on Facebook, on our website at www.kbc.co.ke, and on YouTube. So if at all you have any questions, if at all you have any comments and thoughts, share in your thoughts on our respective social media platforms. On Twitter, the hashtag is Good Morning Kenya, at Aguko, at Fiona Churu, at Dorina Range, at Jane Wambui. Now, let's head over to what is happening in the headlines in our respective newspapers. And I'd like to start with the Standard newspaper, where we have a story on the Senate, and that is a front page. What next for Ruto? That is a question. At a crossroads, even as a bruised DP remained mum yesterday, a day after Uhuru took control of the Senate leadership from his troops, he must have been weighing his options. We take a look at his narrowing choices, that is inside that newspaper. Blow after blow. 1, war on corruption. 2 is whittled down powers. Jubilee party wars. And 4, House purge. Now, what is this all about? Well, in the Senate yesterday, we had a lot of debate that took place in Senate, and the story on that is sharp focus on Speaker Lusaka after the ouster of Murkomen and Kihika. Senate Speaker Kenneth Lusaka yesterday approved the removal of Senate Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen and Majority Whip Susan Kihika, but in the process opened himself up for scrutiny in the background of vicious power struggles in the ruling Jubilee Party. And according to Senate Speaker, he said that I am satisfied that the changes were made in accordance with the relevant Senate standing orders and meets the threshold required under Standing Order 19.5, there having been a majority of votes. The Senate Speaker did not give an indication on when he will deliver his detailed ruling on the matter, but the new Majority Leader, Senator Samuel Pogisio, promised to work with all political sides in the Senate. That story also is in the other newspaper, on the Daily Nation, where we have on the front page of the Daily Nation, where the question is, who's next on the chopping board? That is on the front page of the Daily Nation. We have National Assembly is the next stop in the titanic battle between President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto, whose allies rushed to court yesterday to stop the onslaught. That is on that front page, where we have an image of Aden Duale, the majority leader and member of parliament of Garissa town. He may escape the ask as he is considered a moderate. Pictures of Kimani Ichung'wah, Benjamin Washiali, and Cecil Mbarire. Now, this story on what happened in the Senate It's also highlighted inside this newspaper, where you have Murkomen and Kihika take a wrangle with Uhuru on posts to the High Court. The High Court yesterday certified as urgent an application by Ulster Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen and Majority Whip Susan Kihika, opposing the removal from the Jubilee Party Senate leadership.
Page of the this morning, stay put or move on. Ruto's tough options continues to say that after falling out with the president and watching helplessly as his allies are dumped out of key positions, DP must quickly decide his next best action and possible route to State House. Also pictured in there, there's the images of the former Senate Majority Leader, that's Kipchumba Murkomen, and Majority Whip Susan Kihika. So let's see what more is inside the paper in regards to this story concerning the DP and the two leaders that were ousted yesterday. The caption reads, the available options for Ruto as after Senate setback, where it says that after Jubilee Party leader President Uhuru Kenyatta engineered leadership changes that point to his deputy not being the head of state's choice in 2022 succession politics, it has become obvious that the DP will explore other options to clear the hurdles on the presidential ambitions. So this is just more of the options that the DP has after his two allies were ousted yesterday.
Well, having a look at what they're saying about it on the Star, what Murkomen will lose after removal from Senate position. They say Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen will be adjusting to his new life without millions of shillings and other benefits that come with the office of Senate Majority Leader. When it comes to Kihika, Kihika will also lose a number of allowances and privileges, though her 710,000 Kenya shillings salary will remain intact. Now, having a look at what Edward Kabasa had to say about it, Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen has officially been stripped of his position as the leader of the majority party in Senate. Senate Speaker Kenneth Lusaka, in his communication to the Senate on Tuesday, said 20. Now let us have a look at what they say about it.
The fate of Senators Kipchumba Murkomen and Susan Kihika was sealed Tuesday after Speaker Kenneth Lusaka approved their removal from their respective leadership positions in the Senate. The lawmakers had earlier sought to have their removal stayed on grounds that the process had been flawed.
The minutes show that 20 senators attended the meeting and resolved unanimously to 1. Remove the current leader of majority, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, in accordance with Standing Order 19.5. B. Remove the current majority whip, Senator Susan Kihika, in accordance with Senate Standing Order 19.5.
Senator Murkomen purporting that Speaker Kenneth Lusaka's ruling was made in duress.
Mr. Speaker, this is not your decision. You made this decision under duress and undue influence. And I'm sorry you had to do it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, Senator Murkomen.
A section of senators allied to the Deputy President also protested Tuesday's ruling, arguing that the move may bring the Senate to disrepute.
Be it as it may, let us all remember, we may be sitting here, and out here, but in the history of this country, to be remembered, there was one time where somebody given the responsibility to manage the house sat down and midwifed the death of democracy.
Order.
The death of
Order, Senator Ntuli. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, these are extraordinary times. It calls upon you to stand firm and be the Speaker that this House elected you to be. To arbitrate, be fair, be firm, and resolute in defense of this institution.
West Pokot Senator Samuel Pogesho is the new Senate Majority Leader replacing Kipchumba Murkomen. He will be deputized by Fatuma Dulo Hassan of Isiolo County, while Muranga Senator Irungu Kangata is the new Majority Whip. Kangata will be deputized by nominated Senator Farhia Ali Aji. The removal of the leader of the majority party in the Senate comes months after ODM orchestrated the removal of Moses Wetangula from the Senate minority leadership. The removal of Senators Murkomen and Susan Kihika highlights the widening rifts within the Jubilee Party.
This Wednesday on the Star front page says, Raila plays a key role as Uhuru gets forceful. Raila plays key role as Uhuru gets forceful. President planning further changes in government and Jubilee Party despite protests from Ruto. On the front page, there's a picture queues at the Tanzania border as drivers wait to be tested. Having a look at what is happening inside and what they have to say about it in a sentence or two, the new President Uhuru Kenyatta is slowly but steadily becoming aggressive with his deputy William Ruto, with ODM leader Raila Odinga playing a key role behind the scenes. President Uhuru Kenyatta is slowly but steadily becoming aggressive with his deputy William Ruto, with ODM leader Raila Odinga playing a key role behind the scenes. Ram?
Right, and that's on the same breath in regards to that this is concerning Jubilee Party and the KANU coalition. We have on our other daily, Ruto's choices as party slips from his grasp. That is on the that is in the headline there. While his allies have indicated their resolve to fight from within, the manner in which they conceded to both changes in Senate and Jubilee Party is indicative of the narrowed choices they have. From Mwangi Kiunjuri's The Service Party to Moses Curious Transformational National Alliance, at least 5 political parties have indicated that they are ready to welcome the Deputy President and his troops. And according to Kimani Ichung'wa, the Kikuyu Member of Parliament, he says, and I quote, "We are in Jubilee to last. We are not visitors in Jubilee, but shareholders. We will fight from within and shield our party from an attempted takeover by those drunk with power." Still on the same breath, on the same paper, inside State House meeting that swept away DP Ruto allies, senators requested for another meeting with head of state where they will air their grievances. Assembly chaired by President Kenyatta, and only 2 items for the agenda: removal of Senate leader and election of the new. The State House meeting that toppled key allies of Deputy President William Ruto lasted 45 minutes and was characterized by unmistakable anonymity of purpose. And according to the minutes, it says, and I quote, "Pursuant to demands made by the members of parliament to the party secretariat on diverse dates for a parliamentary group meeting, this meeting was convened." That is according to the meeting that most people dispute that it was illegal. That is in regards to the Jubilee Party. Inside 45 minutes State House talks that sank DP allies.
Still on matters Jubilee and KANU this morning, Pogisho defends his election, vows to unite Jubilee coalition. So he says that the West Pokot Senator Samuel Pogisho yesterday defended his controversial election as the Senate leader of majority as he took up his new assignment, though defensive of his election during Monday's Jubilee Coalition Senate Parliamentary Group meeting, which was chaired by the President at State House. The KANU senator struck a reconciliatory tone, vowing to build bridges. So this is building bridges between KANU and Jubilee.
Now let us have a look at what they're saying on the Star. Uhuru allies now target pro-DP Ruto nominees. Those in the president's camp claim the lawmakers have violated the Jubilee Party constitution. I'll read a sentence. President Uhuru Kenyatta lieutenants are targeting 5 nominated senators allied to DP William Ruto in another round of handshake that could see them lose their seats. Now let's have a look at what Ben Troy-Njue has to say about this.
The appeal filed at the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal by Jubilee Party Deputy Secretary General Caleb Kositani, Nakuru Senator Susan Kehika, and the National Assembly Majority Chief Whip Benjamin Washiali has been certified as urgent, and the agreement between the two parties declared null and void. The interim order also restrained Jubilee Secretary General Raphael Tuju and acting Jubilee National Chairman Nelson Zuya from making any coalition agreements on behalf of the Jubilee Party before resolutions are made by the National Executive Council. Senator Susan Kihika and 3 others had moved to the tribunal challenging the authenticity of the coalition agreement, and claimed it was contravening the party's coalition as the party's National Executive Council had not convened to ratify the agreement. Jubilee Party and KANU have been listed as the interested parties in the suit.
Still on the Star, let's have a look at the Star survey. Yesterday's question, should parents pay school fees, online lessons? Should parents pay full fees for online lessons? Surprisingly, 70% say no and 30% say yes. Today's survey, do you think Gideon Moi can make a good president? Do you think Gideon Moi can make a good president? That is the survey on the Star today. Let's have a look at another story. KDF treats Somali girl with 40% bans. Right? The KDF treats Somali girl with 40% bans. The KDF is not just using tanks and heavy machine guns to liberate the villages of Somalia. It's also attending to the needs of residents and treating some one wound at a time. I think you should just grab a copy of the Star and find out the juice of that story as we learn more about how the KDF is treating this situation. Still on the Star, let me highlight a story written twist and turns. Police now are probing murder in Buruburu car fire death. This is a continuing developing story. Courts allows DCI to investigate victims' bank and M-Pesa accounts.
From politics, now coming to COVID-19, state boosts border security to lock out imported cases, where the government has beefed up security at the border points to curb importation of coronavirus from neighboring countries as cases rose to 715, and this is after 15 more cases were confirmed yesterday. Also, during yesterday's briefing, the CAS Rashid Aman said that 3 more people have died of COVID-19, bringing the total number of deaths in the country as of now to 36. So he continued to say that there's a high-level team led by the acting DG, that is Patrick Amoth, and had been dispatched to Kenya, Tanzania, and Namanga border points in Kajiado to ascertain the measures needed to curb cross-border transmission of the disease. Remember, they were mentioning that as of now, there's a lot of border transmission disease, and this is just what they're doing to see how best they can curb the spread of the disease through the border points. Now, still coming back to matters border points and across the entire East African. So the EACC presidents pledge a united approach against coronavirus. Pictured in there is an image of our president, that is President Uhuru Kenyatta. But the EAC heads of state yesterday pledged to ensure free movement of goods and management of cross-border spread of COVID-19. So this happened in a virtual meeting convened by President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, who is the EAC chairperson. The leaders agreed to prioritize the implementation of measures that will ensure uninterrupted cross-border movements of goods, even as the region continues to battle the pandemic. So they also asked the state agencies responsible for health, transport, and EAC affairs to roll out border screening and testing measures, especially for truck drivers that do not compromise cross-border movement of goods. Remember that truck drivers were complaining a lot because of the long hours they take in regards to how best they can be screened and tested. So this is just one of the things that they're rolling out, at least to see the truck drivers being tested on time and goods being transported on time to various parts of the African countries.
All right, and still on one story that was mentioned by Fiona previously in the education sector, let's look at what the CS is saying. The CS of Education says George Magoha has a roadmap to reopen schools. So on the back page of one of our dailies here, it says CS forms team to craft back to school roadmap. Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha has formed a 9-member committee to craft a back-to-school roadmap and advise them on steps to take in a sector ravaged by COVID-19. Now, the COVID-19 Education Response Committee will be chaired by Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development Chairperson Sarah Ruto. CS forms team to craft back-to-school roadmap. We have online programs by Kenya Institute of Curriculum Education said to lock out poor children. Now, that story is also in our other dailies on that in regards to Magoha, in regards to education, says Magoha picks team to plan for schools reopening. Schools opening. Secondary schools had demand a partial opening by end of June, even as teachers' union ask for assurances of safety for school communities. With no clear end in sight of pandemic, the 9-member committee is expected to review school calendar and advise on safety measures. And according to the CS, they say that all schools must be given temperature guns, which will be used during each and every break to monitor students in school. The government has designated some 460 schools and colleges across the country as isolation centers.
Well, on the Star, we have a story on education. Says CS Magoha appoints a committee to spearhead school reopening. Yeah. So there's a picture of Education CS George Magoha, and it says, one sentence, the Education Ministry has commissioned a team to guide its strategy for school reopening and operations in the coronavirus era. So there's a lot that is happening to ensure that schools are reopened in good time and that students are happy. Now let's have a look at what our reporter Yeri had to say about this.
Although schools were expected to resume learning for the second term on Monday, 4th May, the Ministry of Education extended the reopening date by 1 month as part of national efforts to scale up the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. Aware of the effects of the health crisis to the basic education sector, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha has appointed Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development Council Chairperson Dr. Sarah Ruto to lead the COVID-19 Education Response Committee comprising 10 members. They are Kenya Secondary Schools Head Association Chairman Indimuli Kahi, his counterpart from the primary school heads Nicholas Gatheima, Peter Ndoro, Nicholas Maiyo, Agustin Mudhigani, Jen Mwangi, Nelson Makanda, Sheikh Munawar Khan, Mutiso Wambua, and Peter Sitenei. The committee will also have 6 ex-official members, which include Ruth Mugambi, Patrick Ochich, Gabriel Madhenge, Paul Kibet, Anne Gashoya, and Dr. Lois Ombajo. The committee is mandated to advise the Cabinet Secretary on timing for the reopening of the basic education institutions, including boarding schools, review and reorganization of the school calendar. Dr. Ruto and her team will also advise on the health and safety measures to be put in place by all schools, in addition to identifying institutions adversely affected by the coronavirus pandemic and appropriate mitigation and recovery measures. Suleiman Yeri, Channel 1 News.
One more story on the Star to do with education. The University of Nairobi students to take their end semester exams online. Varsity Senate last week endorsed online exams to avoid losing more time. So that's what is happening when it comes to education, higher learning at the University of Nairobi. Still on the Star, fear of disease outbreak hits Naivasha IDP camp. Yeah, fears of a disease outbreak have hit a camp hosting over 400 flood victims in Naivasha due to cold weather coupled with poor living conditions.
Interesting story on our website this morning where Kenyans stranded in UK get a second chance to return home. Remember that the international flights were banned in March, and now the government is looking for ways to see how Kenyans that are stranded in different parts of the African continent and even beyond can find their way back home. So this is Kenyans stranded in UK get a second chance to return home. There's also a similar story this morning on our papers where international flights could resume soon. So state to follow trend by other countries to get air transport back and revamp economy battered by corona, where Kenya is considering opening up her airspace to international flights after a ban imposed in March to stop the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. The move, which follows global trends to open up their economies even as they battle the spread and impact of COVID-19, is expected to give the economy more traction amid the pandemic. In this move of banning of international flights, it resulted to economies going down because a good number of businesses at least rely on people moving in and moving out. So when they give these guidelines on how this will be happening, then we'll continue informing you and let you know how this will unfold.
Now, let's head over to what's happening across the country. Remember, it has been raining. And even as talk about the COVID-19 bringing people down, the rains are bringing people down. Floods is causing havoc across different parts of the country. And in one of our newspapers, says Ken farmers stare at massive losses as heavy rains ruin roads. In South Nyanza, crop that has been in the farms for 22 months is yet to be harvested. Now, sugarcane farmers in Nyanza are staring at massive losses following delays in harvesting the crop because of the poor state of the roads. Now, floods cost farmers dearly. The Kenya Sugarcane Sugarcane Growers Association, KESGA, Secretary General Richard Ogendo, said delayed harvesting of sugarcane could lower the yield and quality of the sweetener. He added that transporters are incurring more costs due to damaged trucks and tractors. In Bomet County, sectors of the Kembu, Tegat, Keep Your Seat, Chamaner Road have been washed away, rendering it impassable. Even border riders are having a hard time navigating through it, according to one of the residents there, in regards to how the floods is causing havoc, destroying destroying roads, making them impassable. Roads have been rendered impassable due to the heavy rains.
Well, our reporter, Ben Chumba, had a lot to say about floods update in Kenya.
Thousands of families affected by heavy rains in various parts of the country remain vulnerable, even as the country battles the COVID-19 pandemic. In Mandera County, at least 7,000 families are living in the cold after River Daua on the Kenya-Ethiopia border burst its banks. Flash floods from the Ethiopian highlands are said to have caused extensive damage to property and infrastructure. In a move to cushion the affected families, Mandera Governor Ali Roba, the county and national governments, in conjunction with other development partners, have distributed relief food to displaced families.
We appeal to the Cabinet Secretary for Ministry of Devolution and Asals to complement our effort through provision of additional food and non-food items.
Elsewhere, residents living in Baringo South constituency, especially Ngambo, Sintan, Salabani, Nasukro and Leswa areas, have been forced to seek alternative accommodation after their homes were flooded. Heavy rains have caused the water level in 3 lakes to increase, forcing the people living around to vacate their homes. Baringo South Member of Parliament Charles Kamuren has called on the national government to declare floods a national disaster in order for the government to allocate funds to alleviate the suffering of Kenyans living in flood-prone areas.
You can see right now what's happening all across this nation and what's happening right now. The floods is taking institutions like the Ministry of Education. In my constituency, 5 schools is taken by the extension of the lakes as a result of the floods.
In Kiambu County, over 30 families living along riparian land in Manguo Swamp in Limuru are counting losses after property of unknown value was destroyed to facilitate construction of waterway. The families were forced to temporarily relocate after rainwater flooded their rental homes. The affected families are now accusing Kiambu County government of being malicious in diverting water from a swamp into their homes.
Tungeomba tu tafadhali kama ni serikali waangalie maisha ya watu ambao wanaishi katika hii bode.
People have encroached because utaona manyumba imejengwa all the way to Limuru. And as you know, nature has to take its course.
Meanwhile, youth in Tana River County have mobilized resources to support families displaced after the River Tana forced its way into Milalulu village. The youth, under the banner Youth for Change, distributed foodstuff to more than 300 affected families. More than 17,000 people have since moved to camps.
Tumeona umuhimu wa kuwatembelea, kuwasaidia na kile kidogo ambacho tuko nacho. So tunaomba wengine ambao wako na hiyo moyo waungane na sisi tupate kuwasaidia watu wetu.
And transport was paralyzed along the Njoro Molo route after a section of the road was cut off following heavy rains that led to flash floods. Locals had to improvise ways to open the road by filling parts of the path with stones in a bid to ease movement along the route. According to locals, the floods that started 2 days ago following heavy rains have washed away some culverts which direct rainwater to the Kamwaura River.
Sisi imepepa hiyo mawe na tukasikia kuna watu kutoka Naiswet, watu 3 wamepotea na wachapatikana kufikia saa hii, na tunaendelea kuwatafuta kwa hii mtoni, pia tunaona hivi.
Ben Chumba reporting for Channel 1 News.
Still on matters floods, the Star has highlighted the floods affecting people in Limuru. Floods displaced families near Manguo Swamp in Limuru. More than 20 families in Limuru were forced to move out of their rented houses after water from Manguo Swamp flooded the area. So there's also floods in Limuru, and there's a picture of tenants of plots near Manguo Swamp moving out as the swamp waters flooded their houses in Limuru town yesterday. So we see there are floods, people are removing a sofa, people are moving out, and there's a lot of strife over there in Limuru because of floods. Now let's have a look at EAC, right? Magufuli skips EAC meeting even as Tanzania virus case rises. Tanzanian President John Pombe Magufuli was conspicuously missing in an East Africa Community Head of State meeting yesterday. Ram?
And still on that, when it comes to the East African community, highlighted in one of our newspaper dailies this morning, we have also on that same breath, on the EAC, Chanike Gazeti vizuri hapo. EAC leaders discussed free movement of goods. That is there's a picture of President Uhuru Kenyatta in a virtual meeting of the EAC heads of state and government at State House, Nairobi, yesterday. Continued free movement of goods and the management of cross-border spread of COVID-19 were top on the agenda in yesterday's meeting of the East African Community Heads of State and Government. Now, in a virtual meeting that was held yesterday, convened by President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, the current EAC chairperson, the leaders agreed to prioritize the implementation of measures that will ensure uninterrupted cross-border movement of goods, even as the region continues to battle the coronavirus.
Now let's have a look at what our reporter Ben Jue had to say about the EAC meeting.
Leaders who included President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, and Salva Kiir of South Sudan acknowledged the challenge posed by cross-border trade in the fight against COVID-19, especially the emergence of truck drivers as a high-risk carrier population.
We would want to see our drivers getting a kind of pass, like the old yellow fever pass that we have when you get your yellow fever stamp, where drivers before commencing on travel would be tested 24 hours before departure, and they would be tested every 2 weeks to ensure that they are not transmitting this virus, and also for them to stop at designated places, and furthermore for us to limit to a maximum of 2 the number of operators who would operate a vehicle, 2 drivers per truck.
The heads of state therefore tasked their respective state agencies responsible for health, transport, and the East African Community Affairs to roll out border screening and testing measures, especially for truck drivers, and not compromise cross-border movements of goods. President Uhuru Kenyatta emphasized the need for collective East African community interventions against the global COVID-19 pandemic.
Unless we work together, we are not going to be able to solve this problem, because our borders are porous, our people are one, and therefore we must have a common position if we are to actually defeat this virus.
The heads of state expressed satisfaction with measures taken so far by regional governments in managing COVID-19 and thanked the East African Secretariat as well as the Council of Ministers for ensuring the region is able to minimize cross-border spread of the virus while ensuring the uninterrupted movement of goods. Further, the heads of state encouraged East African community countries to invest more in agriculture production, agro-processing and value addition so as to empower the sector to act as an import substitute in this period when global trade is suppressed by the current public health crisis. The heads of state thanked development partners including the World Health Organization and the Africa Center for Disease Control for their continued support to East Africa country states in combating the virus. For Channel 1 News, I'm Ben Troy Njue.
That was our president there giving his sentiments on what can be done to salvage this situation across border points in regards to matters COVID-19. But still on the same story in regards to EAC, so the EAC presidents pledge a united approach against coronavirus, where the East African community heads of state yesterday pledged to ensure free movement of goods and management of cross-border points of cross-border spread of COVID-19. So that's that in regards to what they're planning to do, at least to salvage the situation. Let's look at another story now. Nurses relaying from poor welfare, says union. So as the world marked International Nurses Day in Kenya, the sector rails from poor pay, understaffing and poor working condition, where the Kenya National Union of Nurses NAN Secretary General Seth Panyako says even with the outbreak of COVID-19, issues like commuter allowance, promotion, additional of staff, medical and life insurance are still unfulfilled. He says the Ministry of Health has failed to consider their opinions and instead opted to go for negotiations with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, that is RSRC, sidelining unions. So that's that in regards to what nurses are saying, even as their plight is not being heard by the government.
Now, let me move on into the world of business today, and I will start with the IMF. Or you have a story on that, and this is in the Standard. IMF raises Kenya's risk of debt distress to high. It attributed the review from moderate to the impact of COVID-19, which has exacerbated existing vulnerabilities. Kenya is likely to default or face problems servicing its ballooning debt due to COVID-19 pandemic. A new report by the International Monetary Fund has shown. And pictured there we have a photo of the IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, who speaks during a news conference in Washington last year. It also comes at a time when the country's tax collections are expected to dip due to the pandemic, forcing the Treasury to raise its borrowing target. Treasury has raised its borrowing target with tax collection expected to fall. Still on the same story, also on our other newspaper this morning in regards to the IMF this morning when it comes to the International Monetary Fund. We have in our other daily, IMF approves 294 billion shilling COVID-19 loan for Egypt. Lender says Cairo will need more funding for economic stability. The International Monetary Fund Board approved $2.77 billion in emergency aid for Egypt on Monday to help the country deal with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, but said the government will need more financial help.
Having a look still on what is happening with IMF, IMF raises Kenya's risk of debt distress to high. The country's debt hit an all-time high of 6.3 trillion Kenya shillings in March. The International Monetary Fund has raised Kenya's risk of debt distress to high from moderate due to the impact of coronavirus. Still on matters to do with business and farming, farmers receive 50,000 avocado seedlings to plant as rains reduce. Water CS says fruit trees to increase forest cover, improve nutrition and family income. Farmers in Machakos, Kiambu, Kajiado, Kirinyaga and Baringo counties will receive avocado tree seedlings to plant before the rain ends.
So there's still the same story on matters IMF, where IMF raises Kenya's debt distress risk, and the International Monetary Fund has raised Kenya's risk of debt distress to high from moderate due to the impact of coronavirus crisis. This was said in an assessment published on Tuesday. Let me just also read another caption of an interesting story here, where Safaricom extends Bonga Points campaign to June 3rd. So Safaricom has extended the Bonga for Good campaign for 30 days to June 3rd to enable customers to continue using their points to buy goods and services, as well as donate to those in need. So that means you can use your Bonga points to buy food.
Now, shifting now into other news, into the world news. Let's head over to South Africa. Well, you have a story on that. South Africans begin to doubt a tough lockdown. South Africans begin to doubt tough lockdown. Ruling ANC is divided, with one side calling for easing of virus curbs as opposition accuses Ramaphosa of issuing arbitrary rules. The tug of war over ANC crisis. There are fears of a second wave of COVID-19. It is tempting to imagine South Africa will look back almost fondly on late March 2020 as a special moment in its young democracy, as plenty of nations around the world appeared to flounder or panic or even turn their backs on the rising threat of COVID-19. This country, South Africa, was possessed by a rare and extraordinary degree of unity and decisiveness. Still in the world news, where we are back to the United States of America. We have Fauci warns of suffering and death if U.S. reopens too soon. President Donald J. Trump has been pressuring states to end lockdowns over COVID-19 in efforts to resuscitate the economy. A recent review showed 17 of the 50 states did not meet a key White House benchmark of loosening up.
Well, on a lighter note, let's have a look at Wades. We don't usually have a look at it, but Lillian Muli, one of my favorite anchors, don't date narcissists. Lillian tells women, do not date narcissists. You can have a look at what she has to say about that on the Star. But let us move over to sports. Tarbay keen to leave a mark in marathon running. Tarbay keen to leave a mark in marathon running. Paralympian hopes to rule road running for years, just like he did on the track.
So before we move to matters sports, let's take a look a bit on what is happening in the world news, where the new virus cases scare as world goes back to work. So the world powers, including Russia and India, pushed on with easing coronavirus restrictions on Tuesday, which was yesterday, despite upsurges in infections in parts of the world and warning of a second wave of this disease. In Russia specifically, the government began to gradually ease lockdown rules, despite recording the world's second highest number of COVID-19 infections. So it looks like countries across the globe are going back to normal. And still on world news, this morning, Madagascar says herbal tonic rejected because it is African. The Madagascar's president, Andry Rajoelina, says criticism of an untested herbal tonic that he is touting as a treatment for COVID-19 shows the West's condescending attitude towards Africa. Remember, the World Health Organization had warned against using untested medicine. So they're saying Madagascar, through their president, says that the reason why this medicine was rejected is because it's coming from Africans. Well, when they will accept it, only time will tell. Remember that also ECOWAS has rejected the use of this medicine, which has allegedly at least cured a number of people who had been infected with this disease in Madagascar. So looking at our last story this morning, 42,000 in northern Nigeria flee violence from militants, where about 42,000 people have fled violence by armed groups in northern Nigeria near the border with Niger in recent weeks. So this was said by the UNHCR. Remember that Nigeria is one of those countries where we normally have those cases of Boko Haram and people being abducted numerously, but at least there are some who have freed this violence from this kind of people. So that's that. And that brings a close to our In the Headlines segment this morning. Remember, we sample for you what has been making headlines in the Standard, the Daily Nation, the Star, as well as the People's Daily. We take a break. We'll be right back.
How can you help me? Naweza cause confusion kati ya Joel na Millicent. Hebu sikani masikio hivi. Atumfanya nini?
Tuoshe vyombo na nyumba.
Kazi yako ni kukuja tu huku unatutenganisha mimi na bei wangu.
Have a good day.
Good day gani na tayari msaharibu? Pia ni Nancy amekubrainwash.
Joel hakani mtoto yote ambaye ni wake. Anawapenda wote sawa.
So mfahamu Joel naye.
Habari yako?
Wewe uko kila mahali.
Bibi yangu wako huku. Kwani kuna tabu nyumbani?
Your father has other sons too. To save him from the embarrassment.
I found out that my father is in Patliputra.
How did you get to know about
Acharya
it?
Chanakya told me. But he is not telling me who.
They killed your grandfather, you know. And they set your hut on fire.
I've learned how to please the authority in order to use the power in my favor.
Acharya Chanakya cannot hide the truth in front of Emperor Bindusar.
Do you know who my father is?
Yes.
I must tell the truth to His Highness.
Good morning, Kenya continues. This morning, I'm joined by Masen Zioka in studio, and she will be talking to us about the COVID-19 awareness in regards to matters stigma. So how can people cope? Thank you very much, Marcy, for making time this morning. So let's just begin with the whole aspect of stigmatization as something that we're dealing with in this time, especially for health workers, for those that are in the, on the front line. How can such persons cope? It is not their fault. In fact, they're even assisting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there has been a lot of stigma that is happening currently because of COVID-19. And for the frontline workers, it hits them so badly because every time, even when you in the public, when you're just near somebody and you just cough, people will look at you and they will want to actually stay away from you. So for the frontline workers, it is of essence that they have to know that they are doing the right thing and know that they are called for that particular task. So with stigma, it's good that we appreciate that it is there, but now as a person, it comes back to personal responsibility, me as a Kenyan. So when the frontline worker is actually doing their mandate, I'm obligated to actually take care of their mental wellness by basically appreciating that they are doing that for the benefit of the rest of the Kenyans.
Okay. Yeah. And you've also had these stories where, for instance, in a family setup, the mom probably works as a health worker, as a doctor, as a nurse, and then they have to go back home in the evening. Then the children will tell the mom, it's either you stay with us at home, or when you go to work, we are leaving. Because there was a story of a nurse, I think it was in Kirinyaga County, where that happened to her. And she was saying that when this pandemic began, they were put in shifts and she was in the evening shift. So she had to come back home and the children are like, it's either you stay at work or you stay with us at home. And she was torn in between because one, these are my children. I still have to cater for, people that are infected with this disease. So for such kind of a parent, how do they even navigate the two? How do they decide which one do I follow?
Yeah. So I think it also comes with lack of awareness because you realize that most children do not even understand what COVID-19 is. So from the mother, probably it's of essence if she just shares, first normalizes what is happening. I know COVID-19 has brought about a lot of trauma to the general population. So it's up to the mother to actually normalize that it is okay to actually feel like, for the children to actually be in a dilemma whether the mother should be with them or actually be at workplace. So yeah.
So it's more of like in a dilemma for the mom to choose whether she should be with the children or be with at work. So when you talk about in terms of awareness, because you've mentioned that the problem could be awareness, what kind of awareness can be created maybe for such workers and even for such families to understand that mom or dad has to do this in as much as, yes, he or she is our mom or our dad?
So the awareness in regards to what COVID-19 is, let's start from there because majority of children don't even understand what
in fact,
this
they see you wearing a mask and then they ask you, is that nini unavaa?
Yeah, exactly. And actually they're wondering why are they not outside playing with their friends? Why have they not resumed school and stuff like that? So it's fear associated with COVID-19. And because the healthcare provider is well averse with what is happening, then it is of essence that they actually take time to empower their children about what exactly is happening. Like make it palatable to them to actually understand this is what is happening. COVID-19 has come, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. We are working to ensure that we mitigate some of the things that are happening.
I like what you've said, that COVID-19 has come, but it is not the end of the world. And we are seeing at least people recovering day in, as much as, yes, we're recording cases day in, day out, but also the number of recoveries are also rising. Do you feel you can get to a point where we can beat this disease and do away with this whole aspect of we can stay for 2 years with the disease, even 3 years and beyond? What is your take on that?
Yeah. I think it's just a season, and thank God for the healthcare workers who are actually working to ensure that they come up with a vaccine to actually treat. I see it as a season, and yes, it has come with trauma. Because basically we have moved out of normalcy, like waking up, going to work, coming back home. We have gone back to a time where people are actually traumatized, like your body is actually reacting normally to an abnormal situation, which is okay.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
And you've also said that, it's like we are training ourselves to live in a space where you have to adjust to the situation. Yes. And you've said, like, yes, sometimes, oftentimes right now we are staying at home, we have to stay at home. But also that brings a challenge. And for you as a psychologist, have you encountered a case where someone is telling, I'm just bored staying at home, I feel depressed, I feel like I also want to take my life, this thing is becoming too hard and too much for me to bear? Have you had such instances, someone talking to you? How have you dealt with it?
Yeah, so there are so many of them actually who've reached out and saying, oh, they're feeling it's the end of the world. Look even at the candidates. They thought they're going to finish school, end of this year. And it comes with a lot of frustration. But at the same time, it's just trying to cope with what is happening. When I look at COVID-19, it's like when HIV was new in our country, it had to come with a lot of adjustments. This is a new virus. We do not know how it's gonna go and stuff like that. But you see, with time, we were able to come up with ARVs, and now people can actually cope with HIV. So the same way with COVID-19. Yeah, so you will realize that very soon we'll get a vaccine, and very soon people will go back to normality.
I love
it. It is our hope. So for the people who are probably suicidal and depressed because of it's something that is abnormal, that is happening, but at the same time, look at how can you best cope with it, because there are positive coping strategies.
Exactly. And I really love your optimism, like we will get a vaccine, we will get over this thing. But when you talk about someone looking at that positive side, looking at that positive angle and trying to understand how can I cope with this. Let's still stick on the home, because we understand that this is something that is taking a toll a lot on people living at home, and you're just trying to get your perspective again from a psychologist's point of view. Someone staying at home, what kind of activities can they engage in, at least for them to better themselves so that they do not get suicidal or get depressed because of this issue?
So some of the coping mechanisms they can use is like taking a walk.
Okay.
Whenever you're feeling frustrated and stressed, you can just take a walk. It will actually help you to sort of relax. The other way is journaling. You can actually start
writing.
Yeah, writing down like how you're feeling at the moment. What is it that is making you frustrated? At the end of the day, it's trying to come to look at the root cause of your frustration.
Yeah.
It could be finances. It could be what is happening, basically. So when you write, it actually makes you come to terms with how you're feeling at the particular moment. Then the other way is breathing in. You can use the breathing in and out technique.
That works?
You know, that actually works.
Okay.
Especially when you're going through anger and outbursts, for example. Like you're too frustrated or too angry, and I'm looking at partners in a marriage setup. You know, the husband is not working. Probably they've been laid off work because of what is happening right now. And the wife actually wants food, like money to actually buy food to take care of the children. So it will come with a lot of frustration at the end of the day. So when the husband is probably becoming angry, then the husband can actually practice breathing in and out technique.
Okay.
And it actually helps.
Right. You've also mentioned something which takes me again to my next question in regards to husbands and men. What makes it so hard for them to be more affected in this time compared to their female counterparts? What is it about men?
Wow, I think both of us are affected. You know, now that is where the culture bit comes to play, because you'll realize that men are told, oh, you're not supposed to cry, oh, you're supposed to be strong for your family. But in actual sense, we are all human beings, you know. And I believe with mental health issues, it does not make you weak, as culture depicts. It actually makes us human, you know. So the man has to actually put on that strong face to the woman and to the children. But in actual sense, we are all going through the same issues. And that is why when you look at even suicidal rates, we have majority of them are actually men as opposed to women, because women will talk it out, will share. Yeah, but men are taught to like to
keep it to themselves.
Yeah, to keep it to themselves.
All right, so could that be also the reason why in this time it's more difficult for men to even cope, because men don't share as much and they don't talk as much compared to females?
Yes.
And what can they do about it? Because we keep talking about, you know, men should share, men should talk. Even when we talk about gender-based issues, it always turns out to be women are most affected, but even men are affected. So what can men do even as we talk about this awareness of this disease?
The men need to start sharing. And it's high time we realize it is okay not to be okay. Because mental health...
It is okay not to be okay.
Yes, it is okay not to be okay.
Tell us more.
Yeah, so mental health does not only affect women. It actually affects men as well. And the minute we appreciate that as a society, then it will be we will still keep on recording high rates of suicidality among men. So the men need to talk. Men need to talk to their wives. They need to talk to there are different spaces where men can actually talk. Yeah.
Okay. Now, even as we talk about the COVID-19 awareness, let's now touch on children a little bit, because children are at home. They're not going to school as it was. So that means even their routine has been sort of disrupted. How can children cope in this time in terms of also just understanding about this disease, being taught about it, and staying at home with their parents, with their siblings, and even the rest of other children? How can they cope?
So first of all, the best way for children to cope is first to realize that it is a season.
Okay. So they should also realize it's a season.
They should realize it's a season. And for them to realize that, now it comes back to the parents as the leaders of the home. So they need to actually talk to their children. I know even parents are frustrated. I know even parents are because of what is happening, but still they are obligated to actually talk to their children and explain to their children what is happening. So it will come with a lot of, now we bring out the issue of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And for me, I believe, as a person, I believe parents are the best teachers to their children. Yeah.
In whatever time?
Yes, in whatever time. So it is actually good. It is actually a good opportunity for parents to actually take time to bond with their children, understand what is it that they've been learning, be like a source of help to their children, so that their children feel they are safe. You know, one thing about an anxious person, if as a parent you're anxious, children will always notice.
So they copy sort of from what they see what their parents are doing?
Yeah, they will. If they see you're very anxious, or you're too stressed and you're
scared.
verbalizing it, or you're too scared, what happens to the children? They also become equally scared. Yeah.
So again, it runs down to the parents, what the
Yes.
parents can do and teach and tell the children what they need to be doing.
Totally.
Okay. Now, there's also another aspect, the aspect of information. You know, when this disease began, there has been so much going on in terms of people getting the right information, legit information, because if you are to be aware of this disease and know how, you know, you can contract it and know probably the steps you need to take, you have to get the right information. So when you talk about information, what do you think can be done for persons to be aware? Because even as of now, as we speak right now, we have 715 cases, but there's still some people who are saying, mi haiwezi nifikia, hii ni ugonjwa watu wanaishi huko. You know, so in terms of information and awareness, what can be done?
So right now, I think we can start from now the hotlines numbers that are there, because they're constantly, I know of 1190, it's constantly giving information about COVID-19. We have 1199, we have 116 for the children, you know, so they can be able to actually get information. And on their website, because all of us are actually on the social media platform, then you can look at World Health Organization information, CDC, among others. Then from there, we can be able to give correct information, because you've said it correctly, like there's a lot of information running around about COVID-19, but how correct is that information?
Exactly.
So the places where people can be able to actually sort for correct information, you can look at the various websites, like even from Ministry of Health, CDC, and the likes.
Okay, so those are the platforms which people can use to get information. And again, there's also that aspect of what of those who do not have access to these phones, you know, to call maybe 1190 or to look at what WHO is saying or what CDC is saying. So how are such persons catered for? Because again, they also have to be aware. We have to ensure that everyone is aware of this disease, because oftentimes also the ones that are saying that this disease cannot get to me, you might find out these are the ones who do not even have access to these phones or social media. So for such kind of persons, what can be done so that they can also be aware of the disease and how to deal with it?
I think we need to leverage on also the radio stations, because you will realize even people in the rural setup, they, most often than not, they will have access to radio stations.
At least they'll have
radio. Yeah, and also when you look at even the phone that they have, it might not be a smartphone, so to speak, mulika mwizi. Somebody can still reach out to a platform like 1190, because it is a toll-free line, and it's in operation from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. in the night.
Okay. Again, also there has been the information going out that students might open the school in June, and we have seen students in different parts of the country, especially in the European side, opening schools. When we go through that route, or when we children reopen our schools here in our country, do you feel like it will be safe for them? Do they need to stay at home until when we have dealt with this disease, or should we copy what the West are doing?
That's a good question. You know, I think we need to put in strategies so before we actually open that space where children are actually going back to school. Because our health, at the end of the day, education is vital, but our health is more important.
It's more important.
Yeah. So as government, as people, we need to actually look at strategies in which you can employ so that we can be able, by the time these children are going back to school, we are not bringing about like high rates of COVID-19 among school-going children, but actually it has gone on the low.
All right, and also I'm just saying, like on our screens this morning, there was the images of how health workers are doing their work and how doctors are doing, you know, to ensure that people are taken care of and they are staying safe. Now, coming back to our country, we have the community health workers. And at least more of what you know in terms of community health workers, they're not necessarily the doctors or nurses, but at least they go to probably door to door to create awareness, to teach people about diseases and how to deal with them, how to stop the spread of whatever kind of disease. Do you feel as a country we are treating such persons well, given that we know that they may not be professional doctors per se, but at least they have a touch with the people in the grassroots level? Are we treating them well? Are we taking care of such kind of persons?
Especially right now, I do not think we might be treating them well. Because
what do we need to do?
So I think we need to actually appreciate them because, you know, at times, I've talked about radio station, people having access to radio.
Sure.
But I'm also cognizant of the fact that there are some who might not even have access to that radio that we're talking about.
True. And they need to be aware.
And they need to get correct information about COVID-19 and how they can best cope, basically. So that is where the CHV comes in, the community health workers.
Okay.
Yeah. So they are there to actually help disseminate information. So people at the grassroots level need to appreciate them. But also we need to create awareness of who a community health worker is.
We may not even understand who they are.
We may not even understand who they are. Not unless you're in the space of the HIV, the health space, then it's very difficult for you to actually understand to even know whether they exist, such people exist. Yeah.
So, and as you talk about creating awareness of who community health workers are, because I can tell you at least for a fact, especially for persons living in rural areas, the community health workers are the ones that are being more instrumental in terms of disseminating info, the way you've mentioned. So in terms of creating awareness of who community health workers are, how can we help Kenyans or people know that this is a community health worker, this is how they can help you, this is how they can help you get info of COVID-19, this is how they'll teach you how to wash your hands and how to, you know, protect yourself. How can we do that?
I think we need to leverage on our platforms, like we have the TV, social media, even through the hotline numbers. So we can actually, and the radio stations basically, because that is how information can actually cascade to the people to actually the entire society. So we need to look at that and see how we can be able to leverage, because we have people who have quality information in regards to COVID, in regards to how to cope with mental health issues, in regards to various issues that come to play. So how can we be able to cascade that to the entire society?
Okay, and since you've mentioned that we can use TVs, we can use social media, whichever platforms we can use at least to sensitize and make people know that these are community health workers and this is how they can help you. And we are in a, you know, we are in a TV station. Maybe just break it down for us and make us understand who exactly is a community health worker.
So a community health worker is someone who has been equipped with issues regards to health.
Okay.
So they are actually, their main mandate is actually to go to the community and home to home, house to house, basically.
Right. Mercy, we are just trying to get your voice, a bit of a disturbance there, but we are speaking to Mercy, a psychologist, helping us understand more about COVID-19 awareness. There's been so many issues going around this coronavirus pandemic issue. If I may say, there has been issues of information, disseminating of this information. There's a lot of information this is in the social media platforms. Some may not be as true, and it's just what Mercy is helping us understand. How can we get the proper information? Also just talking to us about stigmatization, because since the inception of this disease, COVID-19, stigmatization has been like the talk of town. And this is in regards to the health workers, the doctors, the nurses, community health workers, people on the front line of this disease. Also stigmatization on the recovery cases. These are also the kind of people that have been stigmatized a lot since they've recovered from this disease. Of course, because of that perception that what if they contract the disease again and they're staying with me in the same house probably, or staying with me as a next door neighbor, or I'm using a public transport with them, then I might contract the disease. So because of such kind of reasons, it has resulted to these persons being stigmatized, being looked down upon by the society, and also for community health workers and even for health workers as a whole. Stigmatization, just as Mercy was explaining to us, is as a result of the fact that they are on the front line. So that ultimately means that they are dealing with these persons like face to face. Anytime someone comes, whether they feel like they might have this disease or they feel like such kind of symptoms or even being infected with this disease, it is the health workers that are dealing with them. So this is what Mercy is helping us understand this morning. How can we avoid stigmatization of health workers, of the frontliners, and even of the recovery cases? Because when you recover from a disease, who doesn't want to be embraced and loved back? It is a difficult time for us all. And even in regards to matters COVID-19 awareness, also another thing that Mercy is talking to us this morning and she'll be helping us understand more about is also how we can sensitize our society and help them understand who exactly are community health workers? What exactly is their role in terms of the kind of info they pass through? Because at least what we have established so far since when we began this interview is that they play a very instrumental role. Community health workers play a very instrumental role, and Mercy, being a psychologist, has really broken down that for us, because she has made us understand that when it comes to the informal settlements, these are the informal settlements in the city centers like probably Nairobi or even the big cities. When it comes to the rural areas, it is this community health workers that play a big role, because then they go to these persons living in those grassroots areas, at least to talk to them, to sensitize them, to make them understand more about this disease. And again, we'll just be coming back with Mercy to also help us understand how we can deal with persons like the PWDs, as well as the people that may have a mental illness, and how can awareness of this disease be created to such kind of persons. Ram.
And I would like to read a tweet here by Antonio Guterres from the United Nations. He says that hate speech, stigma, and xenophobia continue to rise as a result of COVID-19. The UN and our partners are working to ensure that solidarity prevails during the pandemic, according to Antonio Guterres. There is a picture in there in terms of the UN, what they are doing. The UN counters pandemic-related hate and xenophobia as instances of hate speech, stigma, discrimination, and xenophobia continues to rise as a result of this. The United Nations and its partners are working towards making sure that there is a reduction in stigmatization and in the number of people who get affected by these effects of the COVID-19. Remember, we also have some more tweets coming up. We have Dr. Joshua Walrich is saying, Corona tip number 18, if you're struggling to be interesting on social media without resorting to a weight stigma, people commenting on the effects of COVID-19 in people's bodies, cyberbullying on the effects of someone's. Thousands of migrants, workers who are working on highways may succumb to exhaustion, hunger, and stigma rather than dying of corona. An interesting tweet there. Someone saying that, yes, apart from coronavirus, we have so much more coming in terms of stigmatization. We have viruses don't discriminate, and neither should we. Stigma won't fight coronavirus. And this is at K. Person. And Anasema virus doesn't discriminate, and neither should we. Stigma won't fight coronavirus. Interesting image there. Let me just expand that so that you can be able to see how it is. Virus in red doesn't discriminate, and neither should we, according to this tweet by one of our viewers here, known as at K. Poson. Remember, the hashtag, as always, is Good Morning Kenya. Keep sending in your tweets and your comments as we continue this morning conversation.
Remember, I'm still speaking to Mercy, a psychologist, talking to us about COVID-19 awareness and how persons can be able to know more about this disease. Now, Mercy, there's again the issue of the people living with disabilities. We rarely take time to consider such persons. Anytime there's a pandemic, anytime there's a disaster, they sort of like lag behind, probably because of how, they are. But how can we cater for persons with disability? even in terms of how we do adverts about this COVID-19 awareness, how can we cater for such persons? Because they also need to be taken care of.
Yeah, I agree with you, because first of all, we need to appreciate that they are here with us.
Exactly.
And they are human. All of us are the same, yeah?
True.
So we need to actually appreciate that. But at the same time, we need, every time, the channels in which people are getting information, we need to all put in measures in which, in as much as we're giving information to, for example, somebody who is hearing, we can actually take care of the deaf in the society because they are there. Yeah.
Now, when you look at the kind of adverts, especially about COVID-19, I've seen a couple of them. You will barely see them targeting PWDs. You know, someone is talking, we're not even having a sign language interpreter there to at least make this person understand. When they say that I need to wash my hands like this, I need to do this, I can't see the images of that. And, you know, it doesn't really cater per se. So what can be done, at least for these persons to be catered for?
Oh. So, because I am aware that we have sign language interpreters.
Yes.
There are so many of them. Because even me as a person, I can be able to sign as well. You see, so I think we need to actually create, be able to network with as many as possible. We have people who are who are very good in Braille.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to see how we can leverage on people who have the particular skills, so that every time information in regards to COVID-19 is being aired, we have somebody who is actually taking care of people living with disability.
I like that. So we need to also ensure that they are taken care of, because we can keep saying that people don't believe the government, people don't want to respect what the government is saying, but we are forgetting some other groups who may not even be understanding what the government is telling them, yet we are blaming these persons.
Totally.
All right,
and they are equally affected.
Exactly. So let's look at another aspect, even as we bring the conversation to a close. This is the persons that are mentally impaired. Are they more at risk of contracting this disease, just from your personal perspective? You know, these people that are mentally impaired, because again, we are still speaking about them being aware. You know, such kind of persons may not even understand because of the kind of condition.
Yeah, they're actually at a higher risk of getting, because I'm looking at people who have psychosis, for instance, They are out of touch with reality.
Yes.
So looking at people with schizophrenia and the likes, they are at higher risk, because when the image that actually runs to my mind are the people who you will find actually sleeping on the street, some of them.
Imagine, they don't even know what is happening.
Yeah, they are not aware of what is happening. So they are at a higher risk. So that's when I think in the health space, we need to look at spaces in which, or people who can actually reach out to them so that they are properly rehabilitated. Yeah.
Okay. And now, Mercy, help us understand, how can someone create a routine? It is difficult for someone to have a routine this time. You had some people saying, I just wake up in the morning, like at 7, I take my breakfast, I shower, I do some house chores. Looking at the time, it is still 7. Time just is like time is at a stagnant, place because of all that is happening. So how can people create a routine, at least to help them in this time deal and cope with these issues?
So routine comes with discipline at the end of the day, because, I like what one of the scholars said, Aristotle, change is inevitable. You either change or change changes you.
But it is
change has already happened. So now how can you better deal with that change that has come? So it comes to discipline, because now you have to sit down with yourself, take time to reflect on some of the goals that you would want to actually accomplish. And thank God for technology, because with technology, there's so much that you can be able to do. You can be able to listen to some healthy talks. You can be able to do so much with it. So come up with a schedule that will help you actually maximize on your time. The same way as even going back to the family unit, the parents, in as much as the parents have their own schedule of work, some are working remotely from home, then they have to actually take time to help the child come up with a proper schedule for themselves, so that they can be able to follow through the day and at the end of the day achieve as much as they can possibly can.
So basically what you're saying is that routine is very important and necessary if you have to keep a sane mind in this time. All right. So there has also been that issue of police brutality, especially during the curfew hours, and this was witnessed so much when the curfew began, the 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. Again, just from what you do as a person, as a psychologist, these people that probably get clobbered, beaten by police, and sometimes some reasons might be genuine. There's sometimes some are just, doing their own kind of things. For such persons who probably might have like a genuine reason, how do they cope? Because again, there's that perception of, I will now be looking at the society and even what the government is saying and just brushing it off. I don't feel the need of respecting and obeying, because if the people that are on the ground representing the government can treat me as a Kenyan like this, then what is the point of listening to government? What is the point of listening to our leaders? So how can such persons deal?
Yeah, so I agree with you. It is quite difficult for somebody who has actually faced police brutality. And it comes with a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, especially if you're supposed to still go up. For example, the poll who are aired, some of them were from work. And so they
you see that those something like the genuine reasons.
Yeah. So at times, and the following day, you're actually expected to go to work. Otherwise, you do not get income, a source of income to actually fend for your family. So for that, whatever happened to their life, like it was a source of trauma in itself, because they were beaten up, So one thing they need to do is actually talk it out. And that is why we have the hotline numbers. They can actually reach out and talk about it.
All right, so at least being talked to, that's the better way they can cope with such kind of issues. But in terms of the police, now let's come to the police themselves, because they're the one who are inflicting this kind of pain. And the way you're telling us is that some reasons are actually genuine. There are these essential services that they have to leave at those times, and sometimes police don't understand. So how can police be made to understand? What kind of awareness can be created for such kind of persons to understand that, I need to also take care of my fellow citizens?
I think I liked what actually when I looked at the news yesterday in the evening, there was this policeman who was actually trying to have a conversation with the people about what is happening basically. So I think for the policemen, they need to actually be empowered about what brutality can actually do to a person. So that is where mental health awareness comes in handy. And as a country, we are trying to, the other day before COVID happened, the president created a task force to actually look at ways in which you can actually mitigate mental health illness among Kenyans. So it is of essence that a lot of empowerment comes to the police space, and they are aware of basically the harm that it can do to an individual. But at the same time, the general population needs to be aware that it is of essence also to take heed to the rules that have actually been put to place.
So it's two-sided.
It's both sides. We have to look at it both sides.
Okay, I love what you're saying. The police need to be like taught. Awareness needs to be created, for them, and the general public also need to respect what is being said. All right. Thank you very much, Mercy. I have been speaking with Mercy, a psychologist, helping us understand about COVID-19 in terms of creating awareness of different sectors. So thank you very much, Mercy, for making time. We want to move to our next discussion of the day, and this is in regards to GBV, gender-based violence, in the wake of coronavirus. Joining me live is Miss Anne Gunjiri, Senior Technical Advisor. Miss Anne, talk to us about GBV in the wake of coronavirus. What do you have to say in regards to this issue?
So gender-based violence, as we know, it is any unwanted act based on somebody's gender, being male or female. And what global data, and indeed in Kenya, is telling us is that there has been a rise in GBV. It has intensified more than it normally would. And this is common in pandemics, including COVID as well. And there are certain risk factors that are contributing to the occurrence of GBV in our community, which are being, increased due to the response that we are putting in place for COVID. So with COVID as Kenya, there have been certain directives or orders that have been given. For example, the stay-at-home order, the social distancing, the curfews and the quarantines. So these have led to triggers for GBV. For example, with the stay-at-home orders and the curfews, you can imagine a situation where the perpetrator is now locked in the house with the survivor. So we are getting more cases of that happening. And there are cases where, again, because of the curfews and the lockdowns, it's disrupted family life, essentially, because people are being taken away in quarantines. There are people who are locked out of their homes, towns where they used to stay because of this. Again, that has been shown to increase the number of specifically intimate partner violence, violence against women and girls and children as well. Ordinarily, girls and women would perhaps have access to services like sexual and reproductive health services, HIV services. Now, you can imagine with the healthcare system essentially prioritizing COVID, these girls feel like they cannot access these services. And again, because of the perpetrator being within close proximity to them. We've had school closures. A lot of this is coming up now that we're seeing our girls who would be otherwise in schools, which are protective factors for them. It keeps them away from the perpetrator. Now they're actually in the house with the perpetrator. These girls are being made to do huge amounts of domestic work in the house, whereas they could actually be in school learning. But because of the response plans that we have for COVID, they cannot access schools. They cannot access information. Families are locked out. Our social networks, our friends who we normally reach out to in case you're experiencing violence or there might be trouble at home, all of a sudden because of the measures, and the measures are there for a reason, admittedly, but because of these measures, there are certain ripple effects that it's having on family life as well. You cannot simply call your friend, or you cannot knock on their door because of the curfew, because of the lockdowns. So there are certain ripple effects that we are starting to see, that we are starting to record as a result of the COVID response plans in place.
Okay, so Anne, you are so much focused on violence against children and violence against women and girls, yet we also know that males still suffer this kind of violence. Tell us, why so much fixate on these two specific groups?
Okay, this is a common question that we normally get.
Yeah.
When you talk about violence against women and children, it's not to disregard that men go through violence. Recently, we saw the case that happened in Umoja, I think 2 days ago.
Exactly.
That was a case of domestic violence against the man as it was portrayed in media. It is true that men do undergo violence, but data shows that to a lesser extent than women do. So it's not that we simply focus on violence against women and children, we also acknowledge them. And in some of the plans that we have, some of the things that we actually implement on the ground do touch on engaging men and boys in fighting violence against them as well. Marcy has just talked about how men tend to shut off when they go through violence. I think it's more because women are more outspoken. If I am, for example, undergoing violence in my home state, I'm more likely to go and disclose to somebody. Data shows that men don't. So it's not that we disregard them. We acknowledge that they do undergo violence, but how we reach out to them more is engaging their fellow men, their social networks, to bring them on board and to also teach them about domestic violence and intimate partner violence. So any measures that we have for violence against women and girls would apply for violence against men as well.
All right. And also, we know that children are at home. They're not going to school, as it were. And they might also be prone to these violence cases in this time, and also sexual, gender-based violence. So what kind of mechanisms have you employed to protect children in this time of coronavirus?
So yes, as you've said, because of school closures, and not just sexual and gender-based violence, but also what you're reporting nationwide are things like early and forced child marriage, that children are being forced into literally because of this. So what we're doing as an organization, what other government partners are doing is, for extreme cases of violence against children, the children officers are there on the ground. I would implore for the community to start using the networks available to them. In case you see a child who's undergoing violence, who may be undergoing neglect during this COVID time, the community health volunteers are present and they're accessible at community level. The children officers and the voluntary children officers as well, under the Department of Children's Services, they're aware that the risk of child violence and child neglect, child abuse is heightened during this period. They're there. There's the hotline number, 116, the national hotline number, for you to be able to report cases of violence against children. And I think because these are things that go down to our norms and our behavior during this COVID period, I would implore people to use their community networks right now. I think as the government is handling COVID, we are looking on the local government, the county to the sub-county and ward level, to be able to offer the services. If it means perhaps repurposing community halls to be able to act as care centers for children, who are in extreme cases living with their perpetrators and they need that help immediately. Those are some of the things that we can actually do at ground level that would have a huge impact on the lives of the children, and essentially separating them from the perpetrator and putting them in a safe space. So I think at this point we'll have to look more into our community structures to see how it is that we can protect our children from any of those forms of violence. So we're talking about neglect, we're talking about, as you mentioned, sexual violence, we're talking about in communities where they experience early and forced marriage, and FGM as well, now that all the children are at home.
Yes. Now, Anne, gender-based violence has been here for a time, for some long time, if I may say, but for some reason, there's just been a surge during this coronavirus pandemic time. What would you attribute this surge to, only in this specific time?
So, yes, as you've said, the GBV has been there for a while. If I look at the last Kenya Demographic and Health Survey, it showed that up to 1 in 3 women who have ever been married and about the same proportion of men have actually experienced violence. But what we see right now in COVID pandemic is the same thing that globally we see, and in Kenya as well, every time there's a pandemic or in a humanitarian crisis. The fact that you're in such close proximity to your perpetrator, the fact that because of the directives that are there, and they're there to be obeyed, but the ripple effect is that people cannot not access the services as they normally would. The protective networks and the support networks, as I said, with the family and friends, you don't have access to that. Mercy talked at length about mental health. Right now, people are losing jobs. People cannot get in food. There's requests for support left, right, and center. This is because of COVID. And what this does is, within the family setup, within the community, there's such a huge build of tension, of stress, of anguish. And what that does is, unfortunately, in some cases, people lash out. People get angry to the people who are closest to them, the family members within close proximity. So that's why during such humanitarian situations, humanitarian periods, you get that the violence against women, let me say domestic violence, not just violence against women, but domestic violence, intimate partner violence tends to increase. It essentially intensifies, it doubles up it rises exponentially. As I said again, people would otherwise be out there accessing services, say for example, for post-violence services. In case I feel like I'm under threat, I would reach out to a health facility, to an organization, to a CBO, community-based organization, who would be able to give help and mitigate. At this point, those places are not as accessible as we would like them to. Information on how to protect yourself. Right now, there's so much awareness on COVID. Seems like everything else has almost taken a back seat, but I think even as we are raising awareness on COVID, we need to raise awareness on the ripple effects of COVID. What else might happen as we are trying to curb the spread of the disease? So essentially, because of the disease, we are in closed sections, we're in closed houses, we're in closed communities of our perpetrators. So that's why we are getting a rise in violence.
In the numbers. Okay. You also say that, yes, men do not speak as much compared to their female counterparts, but via your toll-free line 1190, do you also get cases of men?
Oh, yes, we do. And men of all ages as well. And which is a good thing. And the good thing with the 1190 line, it's a confidential line. So any man, wherever they are, whatever part of the country they're in, so long as they find what they would see as a safe space, they can be able to call in. So yes, you do have a lot of people calling in, a lot of men calling in, and some of the calls, as I've seen some of the reports coming from that, is that they're talking about relationship issues, marital conflict. And the good thing with the 1190 counselors, who are always on standby, they are well knowledgeable about what to do, what advice to offer. The first thing that we do, even for the men especially, is to be able to listen to them and give them what we term as first line support. So we listen to them and we try and enhance their safety if we can. And the essential thing is that we listen, we validate what it is that they're saying. Typically in the communities, what you get is mwanaume ni shujaa, like what we say, men can't cry. So we give them that space to be able to be human, and we refer them appropriately as well. So yes, we do get calls and address them.
All right. Now, Anne, anytime we talk about gender-based violence, oftentimes people say that it's just always geared towards women and girls, and you're more fixated in talking about women and girls, and we rarely touch on men. And if we do, it's just like a small percentage. So what can you say, just from your perspective, what can men do for them to be more open, to be able to talk about such cases when they happen or occur to them?
Okay. A tactic that has worked for us is using men to reach out to their fellow men.
Okay.
Men tend to socialize amongst themselves. So what we've done is we've identified champions, like in the places where we work, in the communities where we work, including informal settlements in Nairobi, Kiambu, and western of Kenya as well. What we employ and what has seemed to work for men is if they are brought in by their fellow men. So what we do is we reach out to these champions. We are able to train them on some of the barriers that men have to disclose the experience of violence, and how to overcome that as well, and how to allow their fellow men to listen to them and to refer them appropriately. So once we let our champions go into the community, they are easy to reach out to the fellow men now out in the community who might be experiencing violence. And the good thing is that, because again, they are fellow men, they understand what the issues are, and they socialize in the same spaces as well. So this tactic has been able to allow us to reach out to the fellow men and give them the services that are tailored to their masculinity, would I say, to the fact that disclosure might be an issue. We try and address that using the champions and reaching out to them in the spaces where they're comfortable.
Okay.
So that way you get the men coming to us.
All right. Now, okay, so still speaking about gender-based violence and how it's really taking a toll during this coronavirus pandemic time, let's talk about Kenyans living in the informal settlements. Are they more susceptible to violence compared to those ones living in the high-end society? And if so, why?
So yes, again, that is something that we've observed, sadly. You can imagine in informal settlements where there's the issue of shared amenities, the water point, essential water point, central or shared washrooms and bathrooms and whatnot. What we are seeing and what has been reported to us is, for example, people who need to use these amenities outside of curfew hours. It's dark, they need to go and use the washrooms. Along the way, they meet their perpetrators. So some of the people are actually coming and telling us that. And the fact that we live in such close proximity to each other with the setup of informal settlements, again, that close proximity is working against them in some way, but unfortunately, they can't get away from that. So some of the measures that we are putting in place, or what we are imploring, for example, with our local government, is any dark alleys in places like Kibera that lead to the social amenities, light them up, as simple as that. Such small actions do actually deter violence from occurring. Mercy mentioned the coping strategies. We can't change the setup of how informal settlements are and the home situation where you have several members of family living together. But in case the tension does get to that level, do as what she recommended. Breathe in and out. Get yourself out of that situation if you can. And we're not saying that you disobey the orders that are there, but if you can, get yourself out of that situation. And there's a lot of talking and communication. I think we always take it for granted that because I'm saying this to you, we are communicating.
Yes.
And then during such periods where there's tension, there's communication breakdown. Deliberately talk, encourage, inquire, learn more about each other if you can. Protect the children as well within that homestead, because if there's domestic violence and the children are witnessing it, then they're affected as well. So we talk about building on your communication skills, relationship skills during this period, lighting up the slums. There's the community policing as well, and the Nyumba Kumi initiative and the local chiefs. This is the time where they need to go on ground level and literally go homestead to homestead, area to area, just to find out about the welfare of the people who are living in such areas.
Okay. Now, of all forms of violence, there's physical, emotional, psychological kinds of violence, but for some reason, sexual violence just always seems to top the list. Tell us more.
Okay, I think that has always been it's not that sexual violence tops the list. It's that sexual violence has the most devastating effects on the survivor.
Okay.
By sexual violence, I mean rape or defilement or sexual assault, or even attempted forms of those. They have the devastating effects. But what we've seen is people who record sexual violence and who report sexual violence have already undergone the other two forms of violence. So these things kind of build up in some way. So it will start as emotional violence. If not addressed appropriately, it may escalate to physical violence. Again, if no measures are put in place to address that, it goes to the most atrocious form, which is sexual violence. So it's not that it gets the most attention, it's just that its effects and how to manage it are more intensive compared to physical and emotional. But if you're able to address emotional violence at the onset, if the people are able to disclose that they're going through that and it's managed appropriately through counseling, if physical violence is managed, it's reported, it's handled, then you'd get less cases of the more atrocious effect, the sexual violence, which has a more intensive, it's more costly in terms of managing it. So it's not a matter of it getting more attention per se. It's just it has more effects on the survivor compared to any of the others. But those other ones still can be mitigated before it escalates to sexual violence.
All right. And I'm speaking to Anne Gunjiri, talking to us about gender-based violence in the wake of coronavirus pandemic and how these cases are rising during this time. So, Anne, coming back to you again, what more are you doing in terms of creating awareness, especially for those that are most at risk of gender-based violence?
So number one is sensitizing people on what violence is. Education is a very big thing. What, again, we've seen in the past is people are experiencing violence, but they do not know that that is violence. I think you need to teach people, and what we do is right at the ground level through our networks that we have, our community-based organizations, our champions that we have on the ground. What we do is we are able to capacity build them on what violence is, how to spot violence, how to educate. It's sort of like an information cascade. So how they can go and educate their neighbor, their friend, their fellow peer on human rights, what violence is, and in case violence does occur, what to do, and the referral networks within that community. So that's the first thing that we do in terms of capacity building, training the local champions to be able to cascade the information down. Another thing that we do is we've got the 1119 hotline number, as you rightly said. With this one, it's as good as almost walking to the facility, except you're not walking into a physical facility. What you're being offered is a telephone service. And this telephone service, you can be able to get, again, awareness creation, sensitization on what violence is, and they can be able to give you counseling and refer you appropriately to services within your locality where you can get help for post-violence.
Okay.
In terms of awareness, again, we work with our peer educators, we work with the community health volunteers, and we've adapted the community health strategy where we realize the role that they play at community level. So again, we work through them to be able to educate the masses out there. And also our social media platform. There's such a huge number. Such a huge number of our adolescents and young people, the youth, who are on social media. So we shouldn't take it for granted that all they do is click on Facebook and do the other things. Those are avenues that we use, again, by 1119, our digital platform, Instagram, Twitter, where we have live chats and we have huge numbers joining to the chats. And we try and educate them about violence, its effects and consequences, and most importantly, what to do, even in the COVID era.
Yeah.
And most importantly, what to do should they be experiencing violence, who to reach out to.
Okay. Now, have you... All right. Okay, so have you had the repeated cases of violence? For instance, someone may report that they have been violated in this kind of way, probably this week. In the next 2 weeks, the same person again reports another case of the same violation or even a different one, and going on like that. So have you received cases of repeated violence, and how do you deal with that?
So as an organization,
yes.
What we do is we intently ask girls or ask the people who we work with, our beneficiaries, we ask them about violence periodically. And what we've seen is prior to joining as part of the group that we cater to, they did have those multiple experiences of violence. But what we've trained our service providers, what we've trained the community networks that we work with is once a girl comes to us, it is our job, and of course the girl's role as well, but it is our job to reduce the risk of violence that they might be going through. So prior to joining, yes, you do have the cases of girls saying that they've actually had repeated violence. But once you understand the root factors, the risk factors that the girl or the boy or the man or the woman would hopefully disclose to you, then it's easier for us to be able to mitigate any other reoccurrence of violence. So a typical case perhaps would be a girl saying that, or a lady saying that they're undergoing physical violence because of, say, for example, salary they do not earn, or they cannot go to school, and they cannot access SRH services. So what we do as an organization is a multi-pronged approach. We look at the girl holistically. So we are able to offer, for example, education subsidies. We are also able to take them to vocational training. We are able to help them build on their social assets like communications, how to relate to parents, how to relate to their peers, how to relate to their spouses, and we're also able to offer them counseling. So we look at that girl holistically, and once we address the certain multiple risk factors that they have, then we would get less and less or fewer and fewer girls saying that they're actually going through repeated cases of violence every time they come to us.
Okay, and
so that is the approach that we take.
Yes, and we've also had the cases of where the perpetrators are justifying their actions. Someone will say it's because during this coronavirus time I have lost my job, I don't have my full salary, I'm feeling stressed and depressed, so I'm lashing out what I feel to anything and any person I meet. Let me pick your mind on those people justifying the reasons for inflicting GBV.
So violence is never justifiable. However, violence is preventable. As you've said, with the example that you've given, if somebody feels like the stress is becoming too much for them, there are coping strategies that we are putting out there even at community level for people to do. It's as simple as just taking in the breaths, as 5 breaths, as Mercy has said. It's as simple as removing yourself from that situation and trying to calm down, especially now that we are kind of in a curfew, quarantine, isolation.
Okay.
But just try to remove yourself from that situation.
All right.
So violence.
Anne, I just want you to hold that thought there. Anne, I want you to hold that thought there. You'll come to explain more. You'll explain more of that when you come back after the break on what the perpetrators are doing in terms of justifying their actions. So we want to take a very short break. We'll be back with Anne in a bit.
That you settled down, that you found a girl and you're married now. Never mind, I'll find someone like you. I wish nothing but the best of you too. Don't forget me, I beg. I remember you say sometimes it lasts and loves, but sometimes it hurts instead. Sometimes it lasts and loves, but some.
back, and many thanks for staying with us. We'll still continue with our discussion on gender-based violence in the wake of COVID-19. Ms. Anne is still joining us. Now, you were talking about the perpetrators and how they are justifying their reasons for inflicting GBV to whoever person they do that to. So tell us more.
So, as I said, violence is never justifiable. However, it is preventable. If a perpetrator or a potential perpetrator feels like it's about to get to that point, that's why we have helpline numbers, as I said, like 1190, where they can call and they can be able to receive counseling and more on coping strategies. I think we need to adapt more, step back and talk about the perpetration. What we've seen is, for example, amongst children, them or even the perpetrator themselves, what we've seen is that children witnessing domestic violence or a perpetrator when they were young going through violence leads to them either being a perpetrator or a victim in their adulthood. So how we act right now with our children and how our childhood was has an effect on what we do in our adulthood. So right now, as a perpetrator, what I would say or what I would recommend is reach out to the services around you that you feel like will help with your coping. 1190 again and other national helplines are available for that moment. But we need to be mindful of the people who we are living with, especially the children. For them not to be in that situation 5-10 years from now being perpetrators, we need to watch how we are conducting our family life, reducing the occurrence of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. Because without watching it, then for sure, it will lead to the same cycle of where they become perpetrators and they think it's justifiable because they saw their mom and dad doing the same thing in the house, the siblings doing the same thing. So those are two things. Reach out to the numbers, 1190 and other national helpline numbers for counseling. Adapt the coping strategies that we're putting out there. Step back from the situation. And if you feel like it cannot go anywhere, at the very most, reach out to your friends. We can still call our friends and our support networks, reach out to them to try and diffuse that situation so that it doesn't lead to the act of violence occurring within the household or the community.
All right. Now, you've also talked about children, which brings me to that question of, yes, like we mentioned, children are at home, and it's still important for them to be disciplined if they go wrong. But the violent discipline of children by family members and even relatives, how does this affect a child growing up?
So violent discipline is always somewhat contentious issue in our African setup, as we know. What we are advocating for is positive parenting. What data shows us and what the information that we're getting on the ground, again, violence is intergenerational. A child witnessing, not even them experiencing the violent discipline, but witnessing any form of violence occurring in the household has consequences on their mental health, has consequences on their development as a whole, that when they grow up, as Alia said, that they either become perpetrators or victims of violence themselves. So we really need to watch out for this. And as I said, there are ways where as adults we can break that cycle of violence. But in terms of violence discipline, in our African setup, this issue of positive parenting is a new notion. But there are places where they are doing it. There are countries similar to us where they're starting to do this. It could mean perhaps having better communication skills with the parent. Most of these things tend to be misunderstandings in some way, where the mother or the father feels like, you know, if I spank once or twice, it will bring correctional measures. But sometimes maybe we need to take ourselves out of what we know as our culture and just adapt new measures. For example, the communication. How am I communicating to the child? Does the child understand that what they did was a mistake or have been a mistake prior to them actually doing it? So we need to adapt positive parenting measures now.
All right. And what kind of support are you probably getting from either the government or any other sector so as to continue making your work in fighting GBV more effective and efficient? Very briefly.
Sorry, what measures?
I'm saying what kind of support are you getting from probably the government or any other sector to continue making your work in fighting GBV more effective and more efficient? Very briefly.
So as Alva City, we play a big role on the policy tables, trying to actually bring the community aspect on the policy table so that they are able to understand what the communities are going through and how to come up with pragmatic and practical solutions cascaded down back to the community level. So we do play a big role on that. And also working with our community networks, the local administration, the Department of Children's Services, the chief, we're all part of the government. We do capacity building, and we go out there, we go together as a unified voice on how we can prevent violence and some of the measures that we are putting out there for the people to adopt.
Okay.
So it's having a unified voice across all sectors.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Ann Gunjiri, for making time this morning and talking to us about GBV and what you are doing. Asante sana.
Thank you.
All right. So I have been speaking to Ms. Ann, talking to us about gender-based violence in the wake of coronavirus and giving us measures that we can use to curb the spread of GBV.
All right, we now shift gears into the next discussion of the day, and this is in regards to what happened on Monday. On The Viewpoint, we focus on what the president did. Remember, on Monday, he chaired a PG meeting at State House. They endorsed, 1, West Pokot Senator Samuel Pogisio as the new Senate Majority Leader, who is replacing Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. Number 2, endorsed Murang'a Senator Irungu Kang'ata as the new Majority Whip, replacing Nakuru Senator Susan Kihika. And Isiolo Senator Fatuma Dilo will remain as the Deputy Majority Leader, and nominated Senator Faria Ali is the Majority Whip. But now yesterday, there was drama in the Senate sittings yesterday, where we had Kipchumba Murkomen, the senator for Elgeyo Marakwet, coming up to address this issue. He protested his ouster from the Jubilee Senate leadership. This morning we'll be putting that into focus on The Viewpoint. And joining me to discuss this is Alex Manyasi, a governance and policy expert. Karibu sana. And the hashtag, as always, is Good Morning Kenya. Tag me at Aguko, at Jane Omboy, at Dorina Range, and at KBC Channel 1. Remember, we are live on Facebook, and as always, keep texting, keep tweeting. Now, before we get into the backlash, everything that happened, let me just take us back a bit to find out, in your view, why do you think this was inevitable for Senator Kipchumba Murkomen? And I would like to quote what he said. He said that if the greatest achievement of the President of Kenya is to demonstrate to the people of his country that I have been removed as the majority leader, then he is a big man, Mr. Speaker. The President is already a big man. I'm just the son of a squatter. What do you think about that?
Good morning, fellow Kenyans. My interpretation of that is actually trying to play to the masses. So that's what Murkomen was trying to do, trying to push the agenda that it's about them versus us. That's what I saw from that statement. Yeah, that's what I saw from that statement.
Was it inevitable?
It's been long coming. It's something that probably, it was just a matter of time. It wasn't an issue of if, but it was about when. Because if you look at the wrangles that have been going on in Jubilee for quite some time now, it's been pretty obvious that something like this was going to happen. And I think probably COVID could have just provided a safe ground for that to happen. And I'm saying safe ground because that would happen with least noise. It will happen without a lot of public consultations. What I mean by that is without having to hold public rallies to talk about the same. So COVID has just provided an opportunity for some of those things to be done.
The senator says that he was not invited to this meeting.
A lot of, I have had several senators actually say they were invited. Whether he himself was not invited, it's him who knows. But most senators who did not attend have actually confirmed that they were invited. And so, as a majority leader, I would be surprised if he wasn't invited.
If he wasn't invited, it is a surprise because of his capacity in leadership.
Yes.
As a Senate.
As a Senate majority leader. All the leadership should have been invited. And so if they were not invited, then that would be a surprise. However, there will be no illegality in not inviting him, because it was the party leader who was inviting party members. I mean, the leadership of Parliament, the Senate for that matter.
So the party leader can also decide whom to invite regardless of capacity.
So the party leader can invite members of the leadership and members of Parliament. But if for those senators who have said that they were invited and they didn't attend, most of them are saying that they were invited but they did not attend because there was no agenda. Again, whether that is true or not is subject to themselves, because they're the ones who received the invitation.
But now I wonder, you said that the Senator Kipchumba Murkomen was just trying to appeal to the masses. And I'm trying to look at it in terms of power. A power struggle here. When he says that if the greatest achievement of the president of Kenya is to demonstrate to the people of his country that removing him as a majority leader shows that he is a big man, and he goes on to say that the president is already a big man and he's just the son of a squatter. Do we have a power struggle coming in play here on who is the bigger person here?
So I say that because of the insertion of the words the son of a squatter. To demonstrate that he is a representative of the Hustler Nation.
Yeah.
That is what he meant. About whether the president is a big man or not, he's a president. And so to me, the issue of being big or being small does not arise.
Because of his capacity.
Because of his capacity. Because once you're a president, it doesn't matter how small the country you lead, you're still president. And therefore, in terms of taking order, you're still number one. And so it's more about saying that those guys who are already big and who are big are working against us who are small. See, that's the assertion that Murkomen was trying to make. However, which in terms of if you look at it practically, is actually true. In the context that Murkomen grew up in the village, we've seen his pictures in shorts, we've seen his pictures herding goats, we have seen his pictures walking to school. We have seen, before this actually, it was one of the media houses that made Murkomen what he is today. He actually showed up in the Kenyan space about a year before he was elected as senator. And the rest is history. So before then, Murkomen, apart from being a lawyer and apart from having gone to school, probably he was doing worse than some of us.
He was even in the CU.
Really, he was. So when he makes those assertions, it's actually true. It's actually true that he's a small man, a man from the village, a man from a squatter, and he has also probably, in the recent past, he has worked pretty hard to get where he is, even though that has also been part of his downfall.
But now trying to appeal to the masses won't help in any way.
At this point, that's why I'm saying it's an opportune moment, because at this point in time, those masses may not be, it may not be appealing right now. People have their own set of problems. We are talking about COVID, we are talking about people losing jobs. We are talking about people who are going through floods. In his own area, for example, people may not care much whether he's been removed as Senate Majority Leader or not. Even before, when he was Majority Leader, he was still appealing to government for support, to support his people. So really, in terms of, if I was to go down that road, people may not care much about whether being a Senate Majority Leader and being a senator, as a senator without portfolio, does not add value at this point in time, especially. And it doesn't come even at a better time. For him, it's a worse time, because in his own county, people are dying, people are suffering, people have been displaced. We've seen him as majority leader appealing to the president. And of course, the DP has also been a bit quiet during this entire period. So if you contextualize the entire thing, yes, he may say that it's about a son of a squatter, and therefore try to appeal to the squatters.
And you were talking about even the hustler nation.
Yes.
Squatter,
yes.
hustler nation. Get the connection there.
Yes, the connection is very real. But even as he tries to connect those two, the people that he represents and others may not necessarily, at this point, especially at this time, when like I said, there are floods and there's COVID and everything, there's hunger, children are going to school, parents are devastated, and everybody. At this point in time, it will be very hard for him to run away with that kind of assertion in terms of saying that it's about us. It will be very difficult.
For someone who has been in Senate, being so vocal in a lot of things, in the bills, even in so many issues that have been occurring within the Senate and nationally, why would you say that at some point you believe that it was inevitable, that it was not a matter of if but when? Is there something or a character or a trait that led him towards this path?
We have seen public pronouncements. I may not go into the private discussions, but from the public pronouncements and outrage that has been ongoing, you remember the issue, I think they were in Bomas, where Junaid Mohammed was leading, was the MC, and where he said, we demand to be heard, and he was being booed by everyone and stuff like that. And the president was there. In my view, if you asked me, that was the beginning of an end.
Created a fault line.
Yes.
A line of weakness.
Yeah, that was the beginning of an end in the sense that he decided to take the war to the president's doorsteps. He, in his own words, he says, you're already a big man and you're the president. Probably he didn't realize then, but maybe he's realizing it now. And I do not say that if the president is at fault, then you do not fault. Probably what, of course, Murkomen is a great supporter of the DP. But at the same time, I guess when you choose to pursue that line, of course, every decision has consequences.
It creates division within even the party itself.
Of course, yeah. And so you find yourself in a scenario where you're at the warpath with the party leader, regardless of whether the party leader is wrong or not. I guess it creates a lot of conflict.
Now, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen said this, and I quote, I want to say now that Murkomen is out of the way. Deliver for the people of Kenya. Addressing the president. Deliver for the people of Kenya. I will not be your stumbling block. Allow all the bills that have been passed unconstitutionally to come to the House. He mentioned the constitutional bills that have been passed without coming through the Senate.
You know, he has a right to say that, but at the same time, he's been a leader in Jubilee. That's number one. And number two, he's still a member of Jubilee. And so, Senator Murkomen is still in government, technically speaking. So they need to be telling us as Jubilee what they have done. And when he says that he tells the president to deliver, he also needs to understand that the presidency includes the DP. So those are the realities of the things that he needs to also put across.
Well, so when he says that the president passed some unconstitutional bills, isn't he also highlighting weaknesses also from his own part?
That's what I'm saying. He's a member of Jubilee. And so if it's about faulting Jubilee, then we should be asking them as a party, because the manifesto of Jubilee, he was part of that process. They are the ones who promised this country what they're going to do for Kenyans. And so if it's about faulting what Jubilee has done, then Murkomen should also be part of that blame. So it cannot be, I know that the Senate and National Assembly as Parliament have had their own problems. in the sense that Senate has been complaining that there are certain bills that should have gone to Senate, but they were passed by National Assembly without having to be forwarded to the Senate, and the President has assented to them. And I'm sure those are the bills that he's talking about. And so whether that was unconstitutional or not, again, the Senate, as a leadership of the Senate, he was there to safeguard the interests of Kenyans, and more specifically the interests of the county government. And so in that sense, either he should have stood his ground, they should have gone to court or something like that. Number two, being a leader, a Senate majority leader until 2 days ago, he also had the capacity to talk to his party leader, who is Uhuru Kenyatta. So in my view, if something happened when you are a leader, when that position changes, you do not blame other people for a position that you are part of. Some of us have also been critical to National Assembly in terms of the way they have done things. I have personally had a few issues about how they have done those things. However, that does not preclude the fact that the Senate and the leadership of Jubilee has still been in office. They have been in office, and therefore, to me, any assertions to the effect that now that I am out, then those things should be corrected, to me does not arise. You see, it's like it's some bit of double speak, such that
double standards.
Yeah, because I'm out,
now
then fix it. When I was in, you didn't fix it.
Now that I'm out, I hope you can be able to fix them.
Yes, I mean it can't be like that. I do not think it's because Murkomen was in the Senate that those bills did not go to the Senate. I do not think that is the case. But I think Parliament, if you look at it, Parliament has been, the National Assembly has been more powerful than the Senate. That's a fact. And they have used several standing orders and the Constitution and some grey areas even within the Constitution in terms of the two houses to actually go ahead and pass bills without having to refer them to the Senate. Yeah.
Which should not be the case.
Which should not be the case. So it's more about what Murkomen should be focusing on is telling us how those flaws should be fixed. For example, I'm on record as having said that I would have preferred a scenario where Senate was the upper house with veto powers. I have said that. And that makes it possible for the kind of scenarios that Murkomen is talking about not to occur. But as long as it stays as it is, it's not about Murkomen having been the Senate majority leader. It's just about the situation as it is.
You say the cakes of a dying horse? Well, I don't know. But yeah. There are some comments that the senator made. He said, Mr. President, you should stop lying to the Senate. That he promised funds to the House. He asked, where is it? If Murkomen was on the way, give us that money now since I'm away from the House. And in a series of the outbursts, Murkomen also accused even his own Senate Speaker, Ken Lusaka, of upholding the ouster under duress. Now, I would like to quote what Senator James Orengo said, and this is quite interesting. Whatever the anger, the rules of this House must be followed. Murkomen has said that President lied to this House. He should apologize and withdraw the statement. We can't discuss the conduct of a president or the Speaker or sitting judge at such a sitting. But the senator did not do that. What does this, how do you see this kind of turn of events and the speech?
Of course, the senator was angry. That's a fact. The senator was extremely angry, which is justifiable in terms of why he was upset. But having said that, I guess it's also, you wouldn't have wanted to be Ken Lusaka at that time.
His shoes are not,
I guess,
a fixed point.
Yes, because you see, the KANU signed a pact with Jubilee, I think on Friday. And on Monday, the meeting was called, and Murkomen and others were kicked out. And of course, there was the game of numbers. And therefore, KANU came in handy to actually fill in the numbers. And so when the tribunal attempted to hold the merger, Ken Lusaka, that's why I'm saying it was not the best time to be Ken Lusaka. He did what he had to do because he had to do it at that time. Otherwise, if he didn't do it at that time, then it will mean that if the merger between Jubilee and KANU was to be quashed, then the whole arrangement will fall apart. So you see, it's more about it's more about having to do what you ought to do at the right time.
You must do what you must.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not about whether Lusaka liked Murkomen or not. It's not about Lusaka likes the DP or not. I guess it's just about having to get things done and move on.
All right. Now, even as we talk about that, remember I will be joined by Daniel Orogo, a political commentator, to give us his view in regards to the Senate majority leader, the outgoing Senate majority leader, that is Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen, who was ousted. Yesterday we had so many outbursts coming in. He even said that the Senate Speaker, Ken Lusaka, was under duress, and he understands that. But Senator James Orengo asked him to apologize to the floor. We'll be linking up with Dan Orogo in a bit in regards to that, so that he can be able to give us his take on in regards to that. So Daniel Orogo is joining me via a phone call in a bit. So Dan, good morning. What are your thoughts concerning the outburst that happened yesterday in the Senate currently? All right, Dan, if you can be able to hear me, I would like to hear from you in regards to what you think in regards to the Senate proceedings that took place yesterday. So we'll be linking up with him in a bit in regards to that. But now let me come to you, Manyasi. When someone is asked to apologize to the floor and they do not, is that a taint in their person?
Maybe not. I guess it's just about the rules of the House. So the Speaker was under duty either to ask him to apologize or leave the House, or use standing orders somehow to do whatever it is that he was supposed to do. But I do not think that it taints him in any way. And I guess at that point in time, it will have made sense for the Speaker to ignore some of those things, so that he allows Murkomen to vent or to ventilate, for that matter.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, I would like you to give your take on this in terms of the deeds. He said, Senator Murkomen said, "To my enemies," he stated, "you can cheer and celebrate, but I will be back. And I will come back big. We are in the morning of our political careers, and there will be a brighter future." What do you think about the comeback of Senator Murkomen? Would you say that this is the end of something for him or the beginning of another?
You know, as Murkomen was saying that, I'm sure you've seen the clip where Orengo actually told him about a year ago that the position that he's in, he shouldn't be celebrating because many people have been in that position before. So it's not unique for people who are in positions of power to find themselves on the opposite side. It's not unique. Kenya has gone through that. Other politicians have gone through that. And so it's just an issue of timing. So today I'm Senate Majority Leader. Tomorrow I'm a senator. He could end up, for example, not being elected at all in 2022. So it's not a guarantee in politics that you have to be in a certain position. Politics is a moving part all the time. It's always moving, and therefore there's no guarantee in politics that you will hold a certain position forever.
I remember he said that once you get into a certain position, you should be preparing to leave.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's always short-lived most of the time. But again, politics is a game of interests, and so it's about whether if your interests are not being served at that time, then chances are that you will seek other alliances, and probably that is what we are seeing happening today, in that we could be seeing realignments based on what the current interests are. Mm-hmm. So it's not entirely an issue of having to replace someone with another. Mm-hmm. It's about why that is happening.
All right. So I would like also to link up with Areba Omoyo, who is a lawyer and political commentator in regards to this. And Areba, coming from your end, you are an advocate. And what would you say in regards to what happened in Senate? Senate Speaker said this: "I am satisfied that the changes were made in accordance with the Senate Standing Orders 19, 1, 2, 3, Standing Order 40, 5, and 7, and meets the threshold required under Standing Order 19.5, there having been a majority of votes." So the Senate Speaker said that they followed the rules and they followed the standing orders, but Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, on the other hand, said that it is illegal. What is your thought on that? Good morning, Ram. Good morning, Araba.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What is your thought in regards to that?
My thought and my opinion has always been that we need to differentiate legal problems and political problems. In this country, we tend to try and have a merger, but unfortunately, you cannot apply a legal solution to a political problem. And I'll give you two examples. Remember when Waititu was being impeached, there was every effort to salvage the impeachment. But unfortunately, the die had already been cast. And when you came to the issue of Sonko and the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, the die had already been cast. So even as a Senate, as I think Manyasia has said in studio, whatever that was supposed to happen had to happen. It doesn't matter any technicalities, any legal issue. And I would hate to be the position that Lusaka was in yesterday, because, I mean, rarely will people stand up, quote unquote, the head of state.
Yeah. And in regards to that, would you say that the standing orders were followed? Because here we have Senator Kipchumba Murkomen saying it was illegal, but the Senate Speaker justifying this, even giving quotes in regards to the different standing orders, standing order number 19, in different states of in regards to the ruling.
Ram,
yes,
this was a political process. Standing orders are more legal and procedural. If the political process has to go on, the procedures and the law will be bent to accommodate it, and that is what exactly happened.
Now, finally, as you look at these procedures, they are going to court, and Senator Murkomen and Kihiga are going to be having proceedings, and it is in a case before Justice James Macau. It will be mentioned on Thursday when directions on compliances will be made. Mr. Murkomen and Kihiga have been allowed to serve the respondents via email. What will be your view in regards to the outcome of these court proceedings?
I can tell you for sure. I want to begin with the proceedings at the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal. In 2017, I spent a lot of time at the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal representing clients who political parties had acted in a manner that they were not supposed to act. Unfortunately, it's very hard to get parties to comply with the decisions from the PPD team. And when you come to the High Court in the issue of trying to compel, or rather to force the Speaker to return back the positions to Kihiga, I can tell you for sure, the orders might come out, but unfortunately, this is a government that is known with the disregard of court orders. And as I said earlier, this is a political process. It doesn't matter what the law says. In most instances, politicians will get their way out of this, but this does not mean that court orders should not be obeyed. Court orders have to be obeyed. But how many court orders do we have with regard to Miguna's case? How many court orders do we have with the number of judges who have not been sworn in? How many court orders do we have against the IG of police, as then he was, the retired one? So I don't see much coming out of this. I would think that the best thing for Murkomen and Kihika right now is to retreat and come up with a better strategy.
Are you questioning the independence of the judicial system?
I am not questioning the independence of the judicial system. I have been on the forefront fighting for the judicial, for the independence of the judicial system. The court might make orders, but will the orders be obeyed? And that is why I've given an example. How many orders do we have in the Miguna case? How many orders did we have for the swearing in of judges? But has the same been done? It has not been done. And that is why I said earlier on RAM that we need to differentiate between political problems and legal problems. So this is a political problem.
This is a political problem. In your view, Alex Manyasi says that it was bound to happen. It was not a matter of if, but when.
Yes,
do you share the same sentiments?
I agree with that. This was something. These were wheels of politics, and the wheels of politics, when they decide to move, they move. And I've given you an example of the impeachment of Waititu. I mean, people tried rushing to court, but it didn't succeed. And there is a point I needed to put across in terms of the political life of Murkomen. Murkomen should be around 40 or 42. Whatever he has been able to achieve, having been in politics for the last 7 or 8 years, is something that so many people can envy. For me, I believe he has a bright future, and he only needs to repackage himself going forward. This is not the end of life, and as Manyasi said, sometimes in politics today you find yourself on the right side, tomorrow on the left side. But again, this is an indication to the political class. Even Muigai sometimes back, as the AG as then he was, said that sometimes politicians do forget the real life when they live the life of having security, aid, chess cars, and everything. And even sometimes when you're not happy, you forget that you're not happy because you forget the usual life. It's high time that people start living the normal life, because at the end of the day, if you're a politician or you're the high and mighty, power is temporal. You might find yourself on the opposite side of the coin. But I am sure the political life of Murkomen will be great in the future.
What about the political life of Senator Kihika? Your thoughts on her?
Of course, even Senator Kihika. Senator Kihika, if you look at where she has come from previously and her journey in Nakuru and the kind of stake she holds in Nakuru County right now, I have no doubt. But it's all about retreating and repackaging. They need to repackage themselves well for the future.
All right. Thank you very much, Areba, for giving us your sentiments on these things.
Thanks very much, Ram. Have a good day.
You too. So, Alex, you've heard what he's saying. He's saying that there is a difference between we have to differentiate political issues from legal issues. Do you agree with that? Is this more political than legal?
He's actually very right in the sense that there are political issues. And that's why I said, for example, the issue of bringing in Kanu was trying to I'm trying not to say cover up, but was trying to make sure that there are as less legal problems as possible, even within the House, so that when the Speaker is ruling, he's also ruling having the numbers been met. So it's about looking at what is it that we need to do to make sure that we achieve our political milestones, but at the same time not be obviously upsetting the legal hurdles that do exist. And so if that wasn't the case, probably the president may have made a pronouncement without even having to call anyone. But you see, he didn't do that. But ultimately, I guess what we all need to understand is, like I said in the beginning, it has been long coming. It's been a battle that has been going on for quite some time, and so it wasn't going to stop. And Murkomen and Kihika were not also sounding like they were giving it a break. The political challenges that were going on were not looking like they were slowing down. And so it was inevitable. When the likes of the Mrade came back to the party, and Tuju came back from his sickness, there has been a lot of activity in the sense that there has been a lot of discussion around, and so with the reggae having stopped and with COVID around, it was just, I think, a matter of now trying to work around the clock to ensure that what it is that they wanted to get done, they're actually doing it. And so if you, in my own opinion, this might only be the beginning. It's possible that whatever is going on today is going to escalate into many other things apart from just changing leadership of the Senate. I wouldn't be surprised if also cabinet has changes. I wouldn't be surprised if the same moves down to the National Assembly. I wouldn't be surprised.
And that is what most people have been saying, that they are seeing or expecting that these changes will also take place within the National Assembly, that we are going to have an overhaul of the old Jubilee. You'll give us your take in regards to that. But joining me live also over the phone is Daniel Orogo. Good morning, Dan. Hope you're well. What are your thoughts in regards to the comments being given by Alex Manyasi in regards to Senator Kipchumba Murkomen and Senator Susan Kihika?
Good morning, Ram, and good morning to the viewers, and say hi to Alex Manyasi. I hope everybody is keeping safe.
Yes, we are.
My suggestion, just like the rest of the panels have noted, is that I would see this thing into 3 dimensions. One, I would see it in respect to the rule of law. And secondly, I would see it to the respect of the political horse trading and the precedence that it has taken. For the first, just like Areba has point out, is that our political parties and broad-based political parties have not really come in forth in terms of trying to stick to their legal, their legal documents and their legal commitments, because this is not the first time. If we are watching as a nation, then we are treated to what happened recently about the change in the management of the Jubilee National Management Committee, the row that we even talked about in the studio.
Yeah.
And we actually noted that it violates the stipulates of the Political Parties Act and the Jubilee Constitution. And I told you the other time that the changes that Raphael Tuju has made was going to suffice.
No, you were saying that the changes violated the Constitution.
Yes, if I would just refer you back to the Jubilee Constitution,
yes.
I think it says very well. I think that should be Article 9. It says very well that when there are changes that are made, it has to go through the National Executive Committee, and that should be approved. Remember the changes that have been made, including the last ones that we were talking about, the National Management Committee, and right now, the leadership positions in both as the majority in the Senate and in the whip at the Senate had to be approved through the meeting of the National Executive Committee.
And are you saying that
to be communicated to the Speaker? So I think, for me, what happened at State House, I think that is an indictment to democracy.
It's an illegality.
It's an indictment to party constitution, because as we said, and as I've just seen the clip that you played, the majority leader said that they were not invited. Even if he was not invited, it was prudent that the party leadership was to get his opinion in regards to the changes. Now to the second one I was talking to you about. I think you actually see the systematic patch that is taking place not only in Jubilee and also in the Orange Democratic Party. We are seeing the row that is within the chairmanship of the County Public Investment Committee, that is Ledama Olekin and the rest. So you could actually see that all the political parties, the political players, are not sticking to the stipulates of what is demanded in regards to their party constitution and regards to the legal structures of the Political Parties Act and even the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dan, for sharing your sentiments on this. So many things you said.
Maybe maybe as a winding up, I think that what do we see moving forward? My recommendations to the party is to try to consolidate the agenda and try to get them right.
All right. Thank you very much, Dan, for sharing your thoughts and finding time to join me this morning. He says that it's an illegality. Well, that's also subject to debate. But maybe because of the interest of time, what do you think about these changes in Jubilee? We are having, the changes on, party officials within Jubilee, some complaining about this, and there are claims that there are specific people who are being targeted in regards to that. But now, is this something that is looming, that is bound to happen? You think, your thoughts on that? Yet, I'm aware there's a PG meeting coming up.
Yes, I think today or something like that.
It is today.
Yes. Yeah. So, actually, it's NEC, not PG.
It's NEC.
Yeah. So the changes that have been coming have actually been scripted with an end in mind. And the end that is in mind, of course, is for President Uhuru to get hold of the leadership of Jubilee, to get hold on the leadership of the executive. Jubilee, I mean the party. Get hold of the leadership of the executive, which is easy, and to get hold of the leadership of the legislature. I think that's what he's trying to do. So the end goal is exactly that. Make sure that you have control in the executive, which he has, and if he doesn't feel like he is, that's easy because he just kicks out a minister and replaces with another one. Getting hold of the leadership of Parliament, Senate was, in my view, the easiest to get hold of. And all he needed is to get 3 members of KANU into the leadership of, into a post-election merger, and you get 3 members and you're sorted. Getting leadership of the National Assembly is more likely to be more complex. And my theory, and we can talk about this later, my theory is that he's going to bring on board ODM and bring on board Kalonzo Musyoka's party, and most likely Moses Wetangula's party, and try and get hold of the National Assembly. And once he does that, what happened in the Senate will also happen in the National Assembly. And that once that is done, then he will be solidly in charge of the executive, and he will have control over the Senate and the National Assembly, and therefore Parliament.
Would you say that he's trying to clean house?
So once he does that, then I don't think it's really about cleaning the house. It's about having voices that support you. It's about having people that you want to speak what you want them to speak. Whether that's good for democracy or not, that's a different discussion altogether. But ultimately, of course, what we had seen as being extremely complex was when it looked like the president was being contradicted every time. You see, even as a country, even in politics, I think that wasn't a very good thing to have.
All right, thank you very much. So joining me also live over the phone is Professor George Wajakoya. He is the Roots Party leader, and coming in from a party leader, because he has also been observing these changes. Professor Wajakoya, what do you think about the changes coming up within Jubilee Party? Do you think that they are called for? Are they legal or more political?
The issue of legality does not arise. Every party has got its own way of doing what they ought to do as per the standards, alongside discipline. So if like in Roots Party, we have a constitution, and we also work in tandem with the political parties act. But those resolutions in our party may not bind at times, because if a party member, for example, comes very rowdy, wants to do things, wants to show the party leadership that he can be on top of things, and he becomes unreasonable, I as a party leader will remove him. It doesn't matter whether they will. I will not seek resolution.
You will remove him without going through any procedures, without going through any meetings or consultation?
There are those that have procedures to be followed, and there are those that need approval by the next. But where somebody becomes filthy, flimsy, wants to bring in things that are not reasonable and are not within the party mandate, then trust me, I will remove him. He can go and have recourse, whatever view. The point I'm trying to allude to is Murkomen has been a pain. You cannot call the president of a republic, leave alone the president of a party, names. You cannot now equalize yourself to the president just because before the election.
All right. I would like, Prof. I would like you to use sensitive language even as you address the senator in regards to that because of national TV.
There is nothing like sensitive language when the very senator becomes very insensitive when addressing the head of state.
All right.
What do you mean by insensitive language? Murkomen has been used very vague and vile language on the head of state, and we as Roots Party, we join other Kenyans in recognizing the president as the president not only for Jubilee but the president for the republic, and this includes all other political parties. Whether we voted for him or not, it doesn't arise. Respect comes first. The image of the president is the image of Kenyans. If the president does something wrong, that means the country will be condemned holistically. But where a party leader who was actually selected, not elected, selected by the party at the whims of Jubilee winning, now becomes a randy boy for the deputy president and starts insulting the president, we shall not sit aside and see. We shall join those of the like-minded leadership, people like Tuju, and condemn holistically. Murkomen Murkomen has not even accounted for the wealth he got within a very short time. I live in Karen, he lives in Karen. How did he accumulate his wealth so much in such a short time?
All right.
The KRA should also be reined in to look at this person so that you can actually work as a voice.
Okay.
You cannot blame, you cannot abuse the head of state. Simple.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor George Wajakoya. That is Professor George Wajakoya for the Roots Party of Kenya. Asante for joining me this morning.
Thank
you. Strong sentiments there. Your comments on that?
Probably I was being more mild than he is. And,
being ruthless.
Yeah. To actually say the least, Senator Murkomen has been too blatant, to say the least. He's been too obvious. He's been too open. And just like he said, he has been speaking his mind. But unfortunately, his speaking of his mind has cost him the seat that he was holding as Senate Majority Leader. Remember, one of the things that we have to remember it was that Murkomen was not representing the DP. Murkomen was representing Jubilee Party, which is headed by President Uhuru Kenyatta. I think that's something that we need to make clear. And therefore, by extension, if I was him, it didn't matter how much I disagreed with the president. I would have found a better way of dealing with that in my public pronouncements.
Instead of going to the Senate and causing accusations?
Before. Like when he used to speak, you could see that, of course, he was not on the same page with the president. And they have contradicted the president many times. So that's why I'm saying if I was him, I would have found a better way of saying what I wanted to say. Now, now that he's not Senate Majority Leader, he can actually say those things. He has the liberty to say those things because he's not in a leadership position in Jubilee. So you see, if he was any other MP or any other senator, then you can voice your concerns the way you wish. But when you are a leader in a party, then it dictates that your position is actually speaking for the party. And therefore, when you're speaking for the party, when you're contradicting the party leader, then it becomes very difficult for people to understand whether you're speaking for the party or you're speaking for someone else. So you see, that's a tricky situation. But you see, ultimately, I think by and large, Jubilee as a party still has a long way to go. These changes that have happened and all the outbursts from Murkomen and others, they have a long way to go. And probably for them who are young, Murkomen and others who are youngsters within the party, they still have a future. And therefore, in my view, they should look at better ways of dealing with that future. And that future does not only come when you're majority leader. Probably it will even be more pronounced when you're elsewhere. Because sometimes when you're a leader in a party, you could be dictating, because we've also had other people complain that Murkomen and others have been shielding the DP so much such that other people cannot reach him. We've had those complaints. And so when you are in a leadership position, chances are that sometimes you could even forget. And now, if I was him, I will do a reality check and try to find how many phone calls he will get when he's not in that position. Chances are that he's going to be a very lonely man. And so he needs to find more relevance going forward than even before.
Thank you very much. That is Alex Manyasi, a governance and policy expert. That's all the time we had this morning. Thank you very much for sharing your opinion today.
Asante sana.
All right. Now remember, as always, comments given during this broadcast do not reflect the stand of the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, neither do they represent my stand. That's all the time we had today. May God bless you. My name is Aguko. Stay tuned for more of Good Morning Kenya tomorrow morning as we give you more in terms of what is happening nationally and in the world beyond. May God bless you. May God bless the work of your hands.
For more than 50 years, the Fender Stratocaster has been the guitar of choice for music legends like Wildman Jimi Hendrix, Slowhand Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and many, many other pop idols past and present. It's the guitar's unique versatility that helped it reach its iconic stature. The legendary Fender Stratocaster, the guitar credited with creating the sound of rock and roll, celebrated its 50th anniversary during 2004.